It is, let's see, it is 6:06. I'll call the meeting to order. Do we have the minutes of the March 22nd meeting? You all received the minutes from last week via email, right? So, anyone care to make a motion regarding those minutes? Do we have a quorum? Yeah, we do, 5.
Do we?
No.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Oh, that's right, we don't.
Don't seem
Never
like
mind,
it.
we'll put those off.
Come on.
So we don't yet have a quorum, so we will not do anything that requires a vote. I'd like to welcome tonight some department heads for their presentations. We will be hearing from Pam Woodbury, the Council on Aging, Laura Torty, the Town Clerk, and Mary Baker Wood and Lynn Dobson from the Richard Tubman Library. So,
Good evening. My name is Adam Gaudette, Town Administrator, for those that are watching on TV and do not know me. But usually what I do is I've been opening up for the staff and giving just a quick rundown of the budgets, so thanks guys for coming. And then what I usually do is go through anything else they want to share in terms of operations, changes, positives, negatives, and obviously any major changes to the budgets. But these three budgets are a little smaller than the ones you've seen already. You've seen Public Safety and Public Works, and those budgets are quite large in terms of staff and expenses, and also in some of those areas they carry debt service, water and sewer, for example. These budgets are a little smaller, staff size a little smaller, but they do carry important responsibilities here for the town. So the first budget that you have in front of you in the packet I gave you was the Council on Aging budget, and Pam Woodbury is here. She's the Council on Aging Director. Her salary and hours are listed on the top of page 1. Actually, all three of her budgets are listed there. So her, just like you've seen the budgets before, they're broken into $51,000, which is the salary and wages account, $57,000, which is the general expenses account, and in addition, this budget also carries another expense account that's special. It's the Elder Community Services Program. So the salary is an increase of 2%, just like all of our employees this year. We're in the third year of a contract with all the unions. And also the personnel bylaw is recommending has a recommended 2% increase. That's incorporated there. The expenses, there's no changes to the wellness clinics and the miscellaneous expenses line items. What's new this year is the Maple Street school expenses. It was actually I shouldn't say it's new. It was added into the budget last year. We have a reduction. I recommended a reduction of $5,000 based on we think we're going to do better in terms of utilities, but also, as you saw, I had to make $300,000 in cuts, and I think this is one area we can do that. We made some efficiency improvements prior to the seniors moving in there with the new natural gas boiler system. So we're hoping that comes to fruition. And then the last thing on the bottom is 20 people at $1,000 per year is the program that we have for Elder Community Services. It was adopted about 6 years ago, more than that, about 8 years ago. We've carried numbers from 5,000 to 10 to 15, and now we're up to 20 because of the demand. We offer seniors of low to moderate income levels to work off their property taxes, a portion of their property taxes up to $1,000, and they get paid a dollar rate, and then that money is applied to their taxes. And we've increased the demand, increased the dollar amount in the budget because of the demand. But Pam is here. She can maybe add anything that's new to the budget or any changes there. And then she also has a handout that she gave you, which is she's given this to you guys in past years, a comparative community matrix. In addition, the newsletter, and I think she's excited to tell you about the new programs and expanded programs based on the relocation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Pam.
As you can see, the first page on the printout is the comparative community study I do every year. As you can see, Spencer is very frugal with their senior center compared to the rest of them. But I really believe we have quite a programming plus. If you look on the back page of the newsletter, you'll see a calendar with everything that we offer. And as you can see, we have 24 hours a week, and we're pretty packed. And when the ability to go into Maple Street School presented itself, I did think that we would increase and a lot of seniors would come, but I certainly wasn't prepared for the amount of seniors that have shown up. Not just in the respect, every single program I have added people to. I have them offering to help out as volunteer. As you can see, I have no staff. I'm one of the only senior centers around with no staff, no outreach. So volunteers for me are vital. They're helping me, they're donating up objects that I needed. We have a completely stocked kitchen now with donations. People have gone out and bought things for us. We have increased attendance by adding lunches 2 days a week. I have now a full staff that's doing volunteer for the lunches. I brought in a couple of just quick numbers, and on St. Patrick's Day, there were 137 people through the door to participate in the programs, and today was a slow day and we had 96. So I'm seeing new faces everywhere. The other thing I wanted to add and let you know is now currently there are 52 more people 60 and over in this town than children 0 to 18. And then you look at the difference in the allocation. So the children 0 to 18, the seniors now outnumber the children, and this is going to continue to go. We should level off in about 5 years with the baby boomers, but the seniors now need different services than they needed before. We're seeing a lot of different addictions. They call for help. I'm referring to different agencies with that. We refer to fuel assistance. We're getting a lot more Shine. I have a Shine counselor now that comes in on a regular basis. So it's, we're even now, I brought this just to inform people that this month's Blue Cross and Blue Shield newsletter that came out in several different areas, it's sending their members to Council on Aging, because what's happening is there's such an influx of baby boomers that we are all sharing in the responsibility of trying to get them to the right agency or the right help. So, I mean, that it's just gone beyond my expectations of what would have happened. And they love it. They absolutely love it. And if there's any questions.
So, do you have, there are no other fees involved in any of the things that you do?
No, every single program that I do, the town does not, as you can see by the budget, the town does not fund any of our programs at all. Every single program that I run down there is grant funded through the state. So if you see, so basically right now I have five different instructors down there. They all are paid through my grants. And I mean, there was such a demand for one class that I had to add a second class because the first class was too advanced for people to join. And I do computer training on Wednesday because I feel that if seniors have the ability to get on the internet, they're not as isolated. So I gladly take the time to teach them with iPads and computers, and big uptake in that. They want to learn how to do that. And I'm not having an instructor for that. I can't afford that. But it seems to be working, and we're doing great down there.
And are the grants things that you have to apply for every year?
I do.
Or, and none of them are
Currently, what we do is a formula grant, and it's done through the state, and it goes by the number of seniors in town. The way they determine that is on the 2010 census, they went by that. There was 2,438 people in Spencer that were 60 and over. So every year, we lobby the legislature to increase the amount we're gonna get, every year. We're at $90 a senior right now, and I get that money, and that's enough to provide every single program I have. I have a donation can by the state. Oh, I keep saying the state. It's the Executive Office of Elder Affairs. They want you to put out a donation can so that people can donate. They need the opportunity to be able to donate for the program. I have had a couple of large donations of $100. That goes right into a revolving fund. We haven't had to use that yet, but unfortunately, by my grant, I'm really kind of strong-armed into what I can pay, and I'm at the top of the pay scale. So hopefully, believe me, if these people are committed to my seniors, because otherwise they can get a lot more money, probably $25 an hour more, to teach some other place. So if push comes to shove, that money in the revolving account I can always use to increase their salary. But right now, we're holding our own, basically.
And the meals, are they, part of the Meals on Wheels type program?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
yes, they're
Yeah.
like Meals on Wheels,
Yeah.
however, they come to us from a caterer in Worcester called Chartwell's. And it is fully prepared, all I do is keep them warm, and then we serve them up. But then we have to clean up, I had to become Serve Safe to do that, and it's working. And then and I have noticed a few seniors who are now taking advantage of this at noontime, so they're having their big meal at noon at a relatively reduced rate,
Mhm.
and then they can eat something later in the evening. And if they can't afford to get the meal or pay for the meal, they can take the meal free, because it's a voluntary donation.
Oh, okay, so do they suggest an amount, or?
They suggest $3.
Oh, gee.
And you get an entree and a vegetable and a dessert and milk, and it's
My
quite a,
son has
it's
them.
quite, it's quite a good meal.
Yeah, okay, great. Anybody else have questions?
What are the average ages of people, do you know?
Well, I can tell you, the youngest person, since I have a few women that come into the yoga class that are in their 30s. They came in as a guest of a senior and asked me if they could stay, and I said, absolutely. You know, I'm paying the instructor anyway, we have plenty of room now. So my youngest one is 37, and my oldest one that partakes is 94. And I would say the average, if I was to say, like my yoga and exercise classes, I would say they're in their late 60s, early 70s. This is quite a fitness conscious town. Very, very conscious of their fitness. So.
Any other questions? All right. Okay, so, I'll just recognize, as I have been with, the other department heads, that you're all just doing what you have to do because you have to do it. And unfortunately, without the support that perhaps we really need, but,
Well, like the other departments, though, fortunately, you still are able to get grants where many are not able to. So, I mean, that's encouraging.
Yeah, without the
for you,
grants,
yeah.
we could not provide anything.
are there other kinds of grants that, because the population is aging, are more things popping up or
Well,
elsewhere
there's
besides?
probably less grants out there now than there were, but we are looking into the possibility of like the library has a friends group and other towns have friends group. We just have had a terrible time getting people to volunteer to be on a friends group. And then we become nonprofit. Once we become nonprofit, there may be opportunities like different businesses, because then they can take the tax deduction.
right,
You know,
yeah.
and that would open up new avenues. So we do have a lady in Spencer who is not a senior, who is very committed to getting a group going. So we're hoping that that will come in this next fiscal
Mhm.
year.
Because I know there are all kinds of restrictions and regulations.
That's the
and-
problem, you get a grant, they're very
Right.
specific nowadays, very, very, very
Yeah,
specific.
yeah, and they're very, very program driven,
Mhm.
you know. So I just, for a while when there was a huge boom in school-age kids, there was a huge boom in school-age kids grants. And
Mhm.
now, I just didn't know if that had worked.
Oh, I'm hoping.
They took it with them. All right, very good. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you so much. You're more than welcome to stay. Or not, whatever you like. Fine, thank you so much.
Well, I couldn't keep them off because my husband is home this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam.
Thank you.
All right. So next on our list, we have Laura Torrey. She's your elected town clerk. She's been here in that position since, I think, 2012. So this is her third budget or so. So she's in charge of two budgets. One is known as the town clerk budget, and the other is the elections and registrar's budget. So the first budget that she has, the town clerk, again separated into two categories. The 51,000 is salary and wages, and the 57,000 account is general expenses. I was able to add the FY16 numbers in that Nancy requested last week, so you have the comparables. I didn't note that on Pam's budget, but we try to do that moving forward.
So I was just wondering if this is, you know, that's what it was last year, is that what?
That's what FY16 means. That's what was approved.
Okay, but
last year?
not what was spent.
Correct. We don't know because they're still spending it. We're not, it's gonna be
It's
done
still
until
in
June
the
30th.
year.
Oh, he's still in the year, I see.
All right, so, she has, she herself is, and her salary is there, it's set by the warrant. She has a certification, which is included in that. Congratulations, Laura, on that effort. She also has one, full-time / part-time staff person. Their full-time is considered 27 hours here, that's Monday through Wednesday. Bryn in her office, carries some floating hours for additional hours for elections or other. Last year, Bryn was on maternity leave, and there was money carried in the budget for additional help while she was away, and that's not needed this year, so that $2,500 goes away in FY17. So you can see the minimal increase to the salary budget from, say, 97,000 to 98,000. The expense budget went up about $2,000. There's additional costs in the postage budget, and office supplies and bonding, which is different than last year, but overall, pretty similar to what it was last year. So with that, Laura's here, so she can help add anything to the town clerk budget, or if there are any questions in terms of that. The election registrars, we'll get into that in a second. She's in charge of a lot of other folks, poll workers, and works with the registrars and getting elections ready. I'll go over that in a minute. But Laura's one of those that does take a huge advantage of the senior work program. Going back a couple years, Laura had a full-time staff person and a part-time staff person, and the part-time staff person was eliminated and the full-time person was reduced from 36 hours to 27. So unfortunately, the work doesn't stop, and just like you're gonna hear from Mary Baker Wood, things still need to get done, and certainly in elections, we have multiple elections and years that we have presidential elections and state elections, so she's one of those that takes a big advantage of the senior work program, and actually she uses them as employees more so than volunteers, so that's a good thing, but it's also a difficult thing in that we're relying on volunteer help for those services that should be done by employees. But any questions in terms of, for Laura on the?
Is that the floating hours?
No, the floating hours is for our part-time person herself, so we carry, like I carry them for, my staff person, sometimes, you budget, say, 2 hours for a meeting, but she's gonna it's gonna be 3, so it's usually off-hour work for elections,
Yes.
additional, so
I
maybe Laura
can
can help.
elaborate on
Yeah.
that, just for an example, on election day, for the primary, we're here, the polls open at 7, we're here at 6. We don't get out till 12:30 at night, so that's an 18-hour day. The main budget for Bryn, my clerk, is, 3 days a week, 9-hour days. So that extra 9 hours isn't in there, and that happens for every election and also part of the prep work for election. And not just elections, there's census, our work is kind of seasonal. When dog license bills go out, the next week we're out straight, nonstop, and then, it lets up a little bit. But without those floating hours, there's just no way we'd be able to keep up with all the tasks. And Adam was absolutely correct. The senior worker program has saved the town clerk's office. We would not be able to function at the level that we do if it weren't for the fact that I have 4 senior workers working for me pretty regularly. And as far as any cost changes, some of them, like postage, I had to bump it up. We're now having early voting for the presidential election. That usually has a really big turnout, and early voting can be done in person and by mail, so I have to anticipate additional postage costs for mailing out ballots, getting them back, and it's like 70 cents to mail a ballot out, so it adds right up really quick. Records preservation, had to increase a little bit. We have some irreplaceable documents going back into the 1700s that if you don't preserve them, they'll disintegrate. And eventually, I'm hoping that if I just keep doing little incremental projects, eventually we'll catch up. And then our preservation costs won't be as substantial because we'll be just maintaining what we're creating going forward. As opposed to, like, I mean, I found Board of Selectmen minutes that approved the Constitution, you know, in original writing. You don't wanna just let those things go away, you'll never get them back again.
So how do you preserve them?
You have to have it professionally done, it's very expensive. They're sent to companies that like treat the paper so that it's acid-free, and Mary can talk more about the mechanics of it, I think, but they come back bound in a way that people can look at them, and if they wanna, you know, use them for research or something, they can, but they won't disintegrate. Right now, some of the pages of things are so fragile that, you know, if you started turning the pages of the book, they'd crumble.
So they're not doing, let's say, making a digital image and then storing that
No, this is to preserve the actual
actual
image,
document?
the actual document, yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
But you don't do that for everything?
No,
Just all the really
no,
old
only for
ones?
things that are either have historical significance
Mhm.
or that are required to be kept under state statute.
But those things from, let's say, the present day, you could just do digitally, no?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, like birth certificates and things, those are all online, you print them, you know, at will for someone. We are still required under state law to have an actual copy in the office. They're bound in books, and the way they're treated now, and the kind of paper that's used in modern days as opposed to 300 years ago, they'll last a lot longer. So it's not gonna be the same kind of issues that you have with antique paper. So there's that, and then dog licensing, since people that fail to license their dogs have to eventually be taken to housing court. It's a public health and safety issue because of the rabies vaccine. When housing court was in East Brookfield, it was not terribly costly to go because first off, I had more staff, so I could just send someone down the road to East Brookfield for an hour and they'd go take care of any dog license issue that had ended up in housing court. Well, now housing court is in Worcester, and so that involves my sending a clerk and paying her while she's on the road and going, you know, sending them to housing court in Worcester, parking fees, mileage, plus the time, you know, her hourly rate. So it's become more expensive to go. So I increased the cost to cover that as well in my expense lines. But that's it for that particular, for the town clerk expenses.
And all of the items listed in your spreadsheet you're required to do by law. None of these are discretionary.
No.
That's
So-
something that, you know, other
Her
departments.
budget's directly tied to
Yeah.
State
legislative
statute.
statutes that she
Yeah,
has to
exactly.
implement certain services.
Yeah, so you don't have the kinds of leeway that,
Right, I can't say, well, we can't do dog licensing, you know?
right, right.
You could, but it wouldn't do you
It
any good.
it wouldn't work so well, yeah.
It wouldn't fly.
Saying that when it comes back to dog licensing, that like if somebody get like fines or anything like that or whatever?
Not to any significant degree. We do charge late charges, so if they pay late, then we're getting some money, not profit, but some money back. But, you know, there's an amount of effort and cost associated with, you know, sending out the late notices, tracking these things, following these things. once they get into housing court, the decision is not up to us, it is up to the clerk magistrate how they are resolved. And generally, the courts tend to not require someone to like pay a big fine to the town clerk's office. They just will say, well, license the dog now, even though, you know, you haven't for the last, you know, whatever it is, 6 months or what have you. So there's not a lot of financial,
Should give you like court costs or something
Yeah.
like that.
So you really don't end up recovering your costs when you've been chasing?
no, I don't recover my costs
Right.
like for my, to
So
pay my
that's
clerk
good.
to go there
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
and no. The courts can collect court costs,
Sure.
but that's for them, not, they don't
Mhm.
send anything to us.
So any fees or fines go into the general fund, they don't go
Mhm.
back directly into her account.
Oh, the gen, okay, got it.
So we have line items,
Mhm.
like building permit fees, board health fines, for example, we'll have a line item for dog licensing and dog fines. And the monies go back into that fund, that's part of your local receipt revenue. It gets bundled up with the excise tax.
Okay.
How do you know if someone has a dog and they haven't licensed it? I mean,
The,
Someone squeals?
vets, no.
No? Oh.
Typically, area vets will send a notice to the town clerks when they've vaccinated a dog. So if somebody brings their dog to the vet, gives it a rabies shot, the vet in whatever area town will say, oh, this person's from Spencer, and so they'll send me a copy of the vaccination slip. So that's how we generally pick up on dogs. Or people just call us and say, hey, we've got a puppy, what do we do? And we let them know and they license their dog.
I see. But if somebody had a dog and they just said, oh, well, it's just my dog, I'm not gonna license it, you would never know that, or would you know that?
Not usually. I mean, if someone got a dog and didn't take it to the vet,
Yeah,
and I'm sure there's dogs in town that we're not aware of.
yeah.
Sometimes somebody will inform us of a dog, or the animal control officer will say, hey, is there a dog licensed on such and such a street, and we can check, and if not, I'll send them a notice.
And you're really busy every year around census time. I know you were using a lot of the senior workers
Yes.
doing that. You got quite a huge response.
Yeah, we've done pretty well. Every year we've worked a little bit, we've worked harder to do as much follow-up as possible with the census. Every year we are required to do a mass mailing to every household in town. And I'm sure you've all got your census forms and sent them back. Since I've become town clerk, we've started doing a second mailing for those who didn't send one back. And that's really helped, I think, quite a bit. But again, there's a cost associated with that because you've got to print these notices, and prepare them for mailing and all that. And then once all those census forms comes in, each one of those forms has to be handled at least twice. Once to do the data entry in the computer to update people's records, and then again to file it into the current census year file. So there's a lot of paper handling. I've tried to streamline it as much as I possibly can, but it's a town
Any,
clerk's
thought
office, this
about
paper.
Any thought about doing it online to begin with?
No, this is all governed by state statute, so until the Secretary of the Commonwealth decides to change the process, this is how it is done.
Any other questions? Okay,
Her-
moving on to the
Yeah, Laura's
elections.
next budget is the elections and the registrars, same thing, 2 categories, salaries and wages, and then general expenses. You can see the difference between 16 and 17, and the major difference is the number of elections, as always, that's the fluctuation. Laura will have 2 one year, 3 another, and so on. So last year, she had the presidential primary, she doesn't. This year, she'll have the presidential election, and in addition to that, the state election. So, I don't know if you want to explain, obviously the cost for hours for poll workers to work and additional expenses down below for ballot printing, coding, police details, all those things go up when you have an additional election, obviously, but Laura, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but those are the main ones that I've seen.
I would, because there's 2 things that will be unique for this year, not for years coming forward, but one is the Board of Selectmen have decided to hold longer voting hours for annual town election. In the past, voting hours were from noon to 8 p.m., and they have decided that this year their voting hours will be from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. So that entails paying 40-plus election workers an additional 6 hours for that, for that longer day. And also that involves, greater police costs, because we are required by law to have a police officer in the polling place from the time polls open until they close and we're ready to pack up. In addition to that cost of the longer polling hours for the annual election, the state is going to have, for the presidential election, what they call early voting. And early voting will be kind of like absentee voting, but you'll be able to come to the town clerk's office and vote in person. However, the state strongly recommends that town clerks extend their business hours to accommodate early voting. And when you think about it, early voting isn't gonna help too many people if the only time my office is open to the public is Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday till 4:30 in the afternoon. I feel that we need to be open at least one Saturday and at least a couple of evenings, so that people who want to can, come after work and vote, can come on a Saturday and vote, and in a way, it'll be helpful to us during the presidential election, because the more people that vote early means there'll be that many fewer people coming to the polls on election day, because it can get pretty congested pulling in and out of the town hall and just, getting through the day. You've all voted here on a busy election day. It can be pretty crowded. So, there'll be good things about it, but I'll have to have somebody present on a Saturday to handle these early voters. And because we haven't done it, we don't know what the turnout's gonna be. I don't know if there'll be, 100 people showing up on a Saturday, or if we'll see 5. We don't know until it happens.
What are the time parameters for that? How long before the actual, how many potential Saturdays would there be, I guess? Is it like early voting would be
It's
2 weeks out, a month out?
It's essentially 2 weeks out, and it encompasses one Saturday prior to the presidential election. It ends on the Friday before the Tuesday election. So you won't be taking early voters the weekend just before the presidential, but you will the weekend. You'd be able to the weekend before that.
And once again, this isn't your choice. I mean, not that it's not a good idea and you wouldn't do it, but this is.
No,
it's
this is
not-
mandated
you
by
don't
the
have an
you're
option.
Yeah, we're gonna
There's
do
no
it.
option
There's
here.
no.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
I think it'll be a really good thing.
I've heard from people in other states that love it. They're, so, for what that's worth. Any other questions for Laura about the elections? All right, well, thank you very much for
Thanks, Laura.
coming and visiting with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
For all the work you do, and I know you're another department, I'm sure that even though the office is only open Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, you are not a stranger in this building other days of the week.
No, I am not. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Laura. All right, so next is the Richard Sugden Public Library. We have Lynn Dobson, trustee, and also Mary Baker Wood, who's the director. She has 3 budgets categories under her direction. One is salaries and wages. The second is books and subscriptions, which is obviously a different line item than other departments, and then the last one is the expense budget. So obviously there's been some fluctuation with staff levels and service programs offered the last couple of years. So Mary put together this chart for you that shows the changes from what they were before cuts last year, and then moving forward to this current fiscal year in terms of the hours open and the positions. available in the services, so I'll let Mary get into that in a second, but essentially, I think the only changes in the salary and wages budget was the 2% increase for the personnel bylaw folks, the middle, the books and subscriptions line item categories, that needs to be 16% of the overall budget to maintain your receipt of a state grant that comes through our cherry sheet. And then the expense budget, she has some utility cost changes, but overall, less than 5%, I believe. So I'm gonna turn it over to Mary. She's very good at describing what she does, way better than I ever could. So with that, Mary, just to let everyone know, this is Mary's last Finance Committee presentation, as she's gonna be retiring this summer. So certainly, I'm sure there'll be lots of thank yous and congratulations along the route, but this is the first of many, I'm sure. So with that, you're up.
Thank you, Adam. He has listened to hours of what I have to say, so
That's
I
right.
think that's why he's handing it.
I'll stick around. I'll stick around even longer.
Yes, before I get into answering any specific questions about this year's budget, which, as he said, the budget you have before you, that would go onto the town warrant, it is basically a level funded budget. I did pass out this form looking at where we were. Remember that back in July of 2014, we suffered massive cuts as a result of a failed override. We went from a staff of 12 to a staff of 5. We had to close Saturdays, we had to close 2 evenings a week. And so this chart is just to give you sort of an at a glance of where we were, and at the time all of this happened, we were really struggling with staffing and with all of the things that we were doing just to provide core services. So none of this was extra, none of it was something that folks in town weren't using for us. So at this point, I won't go through the entire chart, but basically we're now down to 32 hours. That is the minimum we were allowed by the state to remain certified. It does mean that we got a lower allotment when they did hand us a waiver this year, because we're not open the 40 hours we're supposed to be. And I can assure you from long experience that those 40 hours really were minimum. We had people clamoring to have us open on Fridays and other hours. So this has been a struggle, and we've basically seen people who have to go to other towns. The town of Spencer is expecting other towns to pay, for instance, for Saturday services. A lot of people, that's the only day they can get to a library. Now they're going to Charlton or Sturbridge or the Brookfields because we're not open. And the funding remains difficult. We have the situation which we're still struggling with. We went back down to 5 over the last year. We got 1 part-time position a few hours back. We currently have a situation where we have staff who are having extreme health problems or family problems. I have people who are out 6 weeks for surgery or for injuries or for severe problems. And so with such a small staff, we're now at the point where we have in the last 3 weeks been operating the library at some points, most of the time with 3 people, and at other points with 2 of us. Our minimum staffing is 3 in that building. Because I'm one of them, I'm willing to put that time in. I can tell you it's been very difficult. We would not have faced it. I will say the same thing Pam did too, is that we have amazing volunteers. The Spencer Public Library would not be open the hours it is if we did not have the fleet of volunteers and the senior workers that we have. They have done an amazing job in coming in and help us. But remember, as with any other job, there are things that we do that professional librarians do that have to be done, that we can't pass off to a volunteer. There are statutes that say that we can't have volunteers, for instance, having access to private records. So that has been a very difficult situation for us. We have tried to restore some library programs, and I'll say the same thing you heard from Pam. All of our programming, nearly 100% of our programming is provided through grants we write, through community groups. Our computer courses are taught now because we don't have enough staffing. We used to do them ourselves. Southbridge Savings Bank has stepped in, sent volunteers out who come and do programs. People can bring their ebooks in, their computers, their laptops, and iPads, and get service. And so we've tried to gradually bring back some programming, early literacy program, really key. Anybody who knows anything about education knows that the work we do and the children's room does is crucial. I wanted to, in particular, point out that this last year we were awarded a major LSTA, a federal STEAM grant. It's for early literacy in science for children. It has been an amazing program that our children's librarian brought to Spencer. That has meant all of us have to kind of shift to help cover that. We have, these are kindergarten age kids who are coming in with their families, learning, for instance, what electrical current is. They're walking out knowing what that is. They're walking out explaining to their parents why something freezes. They are getting that first literacy education that in a town like Spencer they're just not otherwise going to get. So we have managed to bring those off. We are expanding our circulation, so now we circulate a telescope and a kilowatt meter and a number of other objects, those again through grants. Local history is severely limited. I simply can't take care of all the requests we have. I can get easily 20 to 50 emails a week on that. We just have to tell them Spencer is no longer equipped to do this. And the book accounts, we do the best we can to catalog and bring materials out. So basically the budget you see before you is the one that we understand is what the town can afford. I have, if there's nothing I've learned from 25 years here, it's that there are realities that we all have to work under. And I will tell you that my staff and I have never for a moment stopped understanding why we do the work we do. And no matter what we have, we are going to be an excellent library. We have always, and I say this on behalf of other departments, we have always given more services than you're actually paying for as a voter. We go above and beyond, and that happens to every other department here. What I do want to say, though, is this is not the budget that the trustees and I approved. It's not the budget we submitted. It is not the budget that I in any way feel is correct for the library. What we submitted was a budget that level funded everything that we could, level funded our services, level funded our book budget, but we need to build back, and we are doing a great disservice to the people who depend on us for those services, that we're not open on Saturdays, that we're not open evenings, that we've had to restrict how the library is used. We have all the resources. We have people who are trained. We have volunteers. We have computers. We have wonderful diverse spaces. We have 24-hour Wi-Fi. People can't even come to use those services. So we had two goals for our budget this year. One was to regain the minimum MAR status. We do not even meet minimum requirements that the state sets. The budget we should have had this year was $367,000. We're not meeting that. And so every year we have to go through a waiver process. Adam has to do paperwork, I have to do paperwork to explain why the town of Spencer is not funding its library at the most basic level. The second thing we wanted to do was reinstate Saturday hours. We are under tremendous pressure. Some cases, tremendous anger that people don't have access to what we do. If you get an interlibrary or holds book in on a Thursday, you aren't going to see that book again until Monday because we don't have that ability. So that was our concern. That was the budget that we presented. That unfortunately was not what the town is able to afford. We do understand that. I want to talk, as I do every year, about there are three myths that are out there about library service and why you're funding us, why you need to have library service in the town of Spencer. The first one is that, and I hear it all the time, and sometimes I hear it in places when people don't know I'm a librarian and they're very sorry they said it, and that is, we have the internet, we don't need libraries anymore. The internet has driven library service more than any other single factor. We have people in using us, they'd be in 24 hours if they could, to use the Wi-Fi, to use our help with the computers, to be able to, for instance, right now, get tax forms. Pam is very good about working with computer access and helping the seniors. She can't possibly reach everyone. We have a wide age group who come in for us to help them with those services. People who are applying for jobs, for food stamps, trying to keep up with their email, all of those services. We forget that not everyone in town can afford to have internet service. Not everyone can afford Netflix. Not everyone can afford the things that we take for granted. And so we are that space. And increasingly, and again, I'm going to repeat something Pam said, in all of the sort of social service programming out there and social service literature, they're sending people to public libraries. We deal now more with social service issues with people who have substance abuse who are using the library, folks who have severe mental issues sometimes, children who have mental issues, who are need a place, a safe place, a place to be. Many larger libraries are now hiring social workers. That is the way our public buildings and our services are working, and it's somewhat of a fit. It transitions into the kinds of things we always do, but it has become a real challenge to deliver. So that's the first myth. Internet has not taken anything away. And then people don't use libraries anymore. I just urge everyone who says that to come into the library. We recently had some workmen come in on a Monday morning, and it had been a weekend. We had the book bins, we had the books ready to shelve, we had 6 bins of books that have come. We circulate 13,000 interlibrary loans alone a year. Well, he came in and went, "What's going on?" And we went, "This is a normal Monday. We have people sitting, coming in to read, people filling up the computers, people doing their own work, people coming in to pick up their books." So the myth that they don't use libraries, and every program we have is booked, usually we don't have enough slots to cover those programs. So again, in a town like Spencer, we're using it. And the last thing is that we're a luxury, there's no revenue. Last year, people used library services to the tune of $900,000 worth of materials. They either took books home, they took videos, oh my goodness, they take videos home. They attended programs they would have had to pay for. They get reduced museum passes. So we're not just a luxury to a lot of people. We are real things that they take home that they use. So, and I promise that's the last time you'll hear that speech, but it's heartfelt, and I want everyone to understand it. So I guess at this point I would say Adam has referred to, basically we have a fairly level funded budget that we are trying to be creative. I do have one other thing that never appears on budgets. And again, I bet I'm speaking for a lot of other town staff. You're not seeing a lot of cost here because we pinch every penny till it squeaks. And I have a couple of examples. The chair of Finance Committee was in the library the other day when we had it happen. We had a very expensive repair that needs to be done on a fire alarm panel. Fire alarm panels aren't optional. We have to have, it's a downtown public building. We have a power supply problem. The part to replace that, I was quoted at, is probably $12,000. Now, I always get online and I always talk to people. Was that the right price? It is a correct quote. The people who work on a fire alarm panel know that live in town, know what our difficulties are, work really well with me, and so they said, listen, we'll try to find you an option. They actually went on to Craigslist or eBay and found a part that was going to be maybe under $1,000. Got that, tried it in, it wasn't working. And just last week, Matt, who was working on this project, went down, he said, I'm going to give it one more try, and he just took out the board, fooled around with it, and found, okay, if I put something in, if I change this configuration, I can make it work. That's $12,000 that I don't have to go to Adam with. It's $12,000 I don't have to go to you with. The other is, for those of you who serve on the Capital Committee, you've heard this. I have been asking for many years for a microfilm scanner. Again, when we don't have what we need to do our jobs, it's not the voter or perhaps even the boards who have to explain this to the public. We have to explain to the public why the town of Spencer can't even have access to its microfilm newspaper. So I'm a good scavenger, so I've been watching the library lists, and sure enough, a microfilm reader scanner came available. It was on the weekend. I had my iPad, looked at it, put my name in, and turned out it was the first name. So I drove last month, drove down to the Walpole Public Library, which has lots of money to get a new fancier scanner, and picked up a perfectly good scanner. It's not quite the model I would have chosen, but with that in, someone had donated a computer and a printer that we couldn't really use in our system, but they work perfectly with this. I figured out the engineering on it, and we got ourselves one of those. And remember, I don't charge expenses. If I go to a conference or if I drive my car down there, I don't turn in those expenses. And I'm sure every single department head can probably give you a list of the things that they have somehow figured out, cadged, re-engineered, done something to. So not only are you seeing the budget, the reductions that we're doing, you're also probably not seeing all the ways in which and we're very proud of our bargains, like anybody else who's just scored a sale. We're very proud of that.
So was the reader free from the
Yes,
Walpole?
yes, they didn't need it anymore, so they put it out. And libraries run on lean budgets everywhere, even rich libraries. So there are lots of lists out there that you could go onto and see if somebody's updated a piece of equipment or has a piece of furniture they don't need anymore. So
Didn't you get shelving too?
yes, actually, from Borders, several years ago. It's shelving we're still using for our video collection. Borders was closing in Shrewsbury, and I just happened to get wind of that and went over and talked to the manager, and our highway department very kindly stepped up with a couple of guys in a truck, and we're still using that shelving today.
Good for you.
We're very proud of that. So I'm open to questions about any of the items on here. Not really a lot of change.
I don't know what to ask you, so thorough.
Well, I like what I do. I actually think
Yeah.
budgets tell us, put all the services in place, and I get to work on the people end of it. I get to see what we do with these every day, and that's,
When you retire, Adam could find a good spot for you, getting bargains and stuff.
I'll be a roving.
Looking for a fire truck or
Give me a BJ's membership, we're ready to go, okay? I think though, so just to sum up, I do want to say this is sort of my swan song. It's the last of 25 budget presentations I've done. I want to extend my thanks to everyone, including the people like you who are sitting around this table, giving your time to the town. And I will say that I've been in the library profession for all my life, and so I've worked in academic libraries. I've worked at Old Sturbridge Village as a librarian there. I've worked as a public high school teacher. I've done a lot of things. But in my 25 years here, I really want to say that there are amazing people who work for the town of Spencer. And I know that the angry voices are out there saying, oh, why aren't you saving money? This is a drain. Why, government is evil. I want to tell you, government is not evil in Spencer. I have known some of the finest, hardest working, most conscientious people, and that's department heads, it's administration, it's committees like you who put their time in and decide, instead of staying out there complaining and saying how bad everything is, who step up and do the work and care that to make this a great town. So I thank all of you.
And we thank you,
Yeah.
and, I've said, and of course, Mary and I spent a great deal of time together, and when you're a librarian named Mary.
Yes.
And we have
You just
over the
can't
many
help
years. And so I was there when that fellow came up the stairs into Mary's office. He was just ecstatic. He was so excited. I'm sure part of it was, oh, I'm a techie and I solved this problem. But the first thing he said was, I fixed it. It saves you $12,000. And so two sides to that. Yes, it's really nice, but I mean, the first thing is not the value of the service. It's, whew, I saved you $12,000. Is that all we think about? We don't value all the work that the town employees put in. When I hear people being so disrespectful and saying we pay too much and we don't want to pay anymore, and when I know what all of you are doing, and I've said it to every department person that has come in, and I say it because we're on TV and I want anyone who watches to get it. If you only did your show up at 9, leave at 5, we would have no quality of life in this town. The library, the town, everyone in town hall, council on aging, police, and fire. You cannot put a dollar value on the amount of service that is gladly provided. So, you know, it just, it's very disheartening to hear comments about all, you know, that townspeople don't want to pay for anything because they think government's just trying to reach into their back pockets to take money. They're not recognizing the value, the incredible value of the money they get and of the work, of what they get for their money. And, you know, how many other department heads in the world sweep their home floors, vacuum, empty their waste baskets? You know, secretary, did you ever have a secretary, clerical assistant, anything to
Me.
that effect?
Me in my spare
no,
time.
I mean, this is common. In business, they do have some sort of assistance type things, and so, but we're not a business, or we don't run our towns like businesses, so why do we have what businesses have, you know?
Yes, I'm planning on going into facilities management after I finish
Right.
this.
Exactly.
It will be kind of nice to wake up some morning and realize that if the water isn't working, or the toilets aren't working, or the internet is down, that it won't be on me. because
Somebody won't
that
be
would
You'll be on
something to
eBay
do.
looking.
We're gonna give you a case of duct tape for.
Sounds like a plan.
So, anybody else have any questions?
No, we're good.
All right, well, thank you so much, ladies, for
Thank you
coming, as
very
always.
much.
Thank you.
You're
Thanks so
welcome
much.
to stay, Bay Path is coming in next, and if you're interested, you're more than welcome to stop. But other than that,
They're gonna
it's
bail.
summertime somewhere.
There's 4 of them, so I'm gonna shift over here.
Oh,
Oh, okay, thank you.
onslaught.
I'll leave these 4
Yeah, good, thanks. Then the camera will get everyone.
Okay, ready? If not, then I'll do my.
Oh, yes, okay. Yeah, so these two names, was it usually, who's the other ones? The two usually,
John, Dean, oh, the two school committee, our two
Yeah.
school committee guys are, Ken Wheeler and,
I know him, but I just can't think of his
and
name.
his name was Zukowski.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Bob?
Bob?
Three or 4 chairs over here on the left, so. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, welcome. We have some seats lined up right in the line of the camera for you.
Oh, beautiful.
Smile now.
Ratings are gonna drop.
Mr. Wheeler, welcome.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
I just had to send Bob a text, so he knows we started.
Oh,
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, good.
okay. We're reasonably on time, all things considered. Welcome. And so for those folks watching at home, we have Mr. Dina Felucci, who is the business manager for Bay Path Regional Vocational Schools, part of the Southern Worcester County Collaborative, correct?
No,
Southern Worcester
regional-
County
Regional Vocational School District.
When we go into the websites to look up the data, it doesn't say Bay Path, it says Southern Worcester County, right? Which is alphabetically so far off, it's tricky sometimes.
Yep.
Mr. John LaFleche, who is the superintendent
Easy,
director, right?
Yep.
And Mr. Kenneth Wheeler, member of the school committee.
And I told Mr. Zukowski 7:15, so he'll be with us in a couple of minutes.
Oh, okay, that's great. I know, it's rare that we're quite this close to being on time. I want to thank you for sending the information, both the soft copy and the hard copy, so that everyone has had a chance to look at it.
Does anybody need a copy?
Yeah, if you wanna pass around and stuff. that you have.
So, sure, here's.
Or
Well, does
the
everybody
PowerPoint
have?
you want?
I've got a PowerPoint presentation with no PowerPoint,
Ah, that's okay.
and I have our budget. So does anybody not have our budget?
I don't know, but I don't have it.
Okay, and this is a copy.
Probably will hold off of this. I'll take a couple down here if you want, Dean.
There's the budget.
Oh, thank you.
There's the budget.
And I'll take any of the copies of the budget back that I don't need, so I can recycle for next ones. But if you need extra copies, I have those. Well, as Adam said, I'll primarily be focusing on this document that we passed out,
Okay.
which was done in PowerPoint, which really summarizes our budget. It's really a no-frills budget for us. We, as you are aware, have again submitted a budget to you that is at the minimum contribution level. I will probably turn it over to Mr. LaFleche just briefly. We did include a letter from John with our budget saying that if state funding continues in the way that it has been, we won't be able to stay at minimum without impacting our programs. And as you look on page 3 of the document, the PowerPoint presentation, you can see what kind of happened to VAPAT this year. The only additional state aid that we received is the $20 per pupil funding that was provided by the state. So in terms of Chapter 70 funding, the only additional increase we saw was $22,720. Minimum contributions went up $144,077, so our net spending increase this year is $166,797. So as you can imagine, with a $20.8 million budget, salaries going up at 2%, the cost of living going up, and inflation, you know, it's impossible to maintain our budget at that. We did it this year because of a couple of reasons. We're coming off the heels of our building project in which we purchased a lot of equipment and updated our classrooms. So we're able to eliminate any equipment needs out of this year's budget, and we reduced supply accounts. And as you've seen in the line item budget, just about every supply line item has been reduced by at least 10%. So we are again at minimum this year, but we can't promise that that's going to continue if state aid doesn't start picking up. So what are some of the highlights of our budget? Now, turning to page 4. Our total budget request this year for fiscal year 2017 is $20,841,414, and that includes a debt assessment of $1,588,741. When you remove items that are not considered as net school spending items, such as transportation and debt, our operational budget went up less than 1.5%. Our operational budget reflects minimum contributions by our member communities. Our member assessments this year total $9,863,178. Total Chapter 70 revenue is $10,107,282. And again, we just want to caution, since we are at the minimum levels, if there are any changes made to the state budget, it will impact assessments. If they increase Chapter 70 funding, subsequently town contributions will be lowered. If they decrease any state funding, town contributions would be increased. There are only 2 real factors funding our budget, and that is state aid and the minimum contribution. So as a little footnote, just be aware that if any changes are made to our funding levels at the state level, it will have an impact on your assessment. Our net Chapter 70 revenue is $9,937,127 because we receive, as do just about every school in Massachusetts, a school choice assessment of $170,155. Chapter 71 busing aid at this point is estimated to be $906,407, which represents about 70% funding. And we went fully with what the governor has recommended in his budget. You are in your final year of your capital buy-in. It's been 10 years, can you believe it? So this, in fiscal year 2017, will be the last time that you see the $63,910 capital buy-in that you were assessed when you joined the district now 10 years ago. So you know what we've been using this money for is we transfer this money into a capital account for school buses. And we've been replenishing our fleet of buses with the capital funds that we've received from our member towns. We are recommending this year that we use $84,702 from our excess and deficiency to increase our operating budget. For those of you that have been on the FinCom for a lot of years, you know that we struggle meeting our net school spending requirements. So we're boosting up our budget a little bit in the hopes that we address the deficit that we have in our net school spending. We're also recommending the use of $50,000 from E&D to continue funding our OPEB liability. And this year, something new that you're seeing is a $30,750 sewer betterment fee. This is something that was assessed, that will be assessed through 2023. Approximately, well, I guess now it would have been
2003.
since 2003, the town of Charlton assessed Bay Path $615,000 to tie into the sewer system. We've been able to pay that assessment with old MSBA grant funds, but those funds ran out this year. So now that assessment needs to go back to our member communities. So we will be assessing $30,750 to our 10 towns, that's not Spencer's liability, until 2023.
Does that have anything to do with the with the
No.
gas, no?
I believe, and John might be able to fill in some gaps here, but back in 2003, the district was under a consent order from DEP when it had its own septic system and was required at that point to tie into the town of Charlton's system. They did receive grant funds back then, as I said, and those grant funds have been able to pay the annual assessment up until this current fiscal year. Our building project on page 6, the first 3 tabs are kind of old news, which you know, but as we will remind you, we received extremely favorable rates on the borrowings we did. The first borrowing in 2013 was $9.1 million, and we were able to borrow that at an interest rate of 2.85%. Just about a year later, we issued another $9.31 million in state qualified bonds. Our interest rate on that note was 3.84%. The borrowing that we did in January of 2015, we issued $9.2 million in state qualified school bonds, and the rate on those bonds were just below 3.19%. And in February of this year, we issued $3 million in temporary notes at an interest rate of 0.75%. Now that note will become due in December of this year, at which time we will permanently finance that debt once we know what the final cost of the building project is, once we are completed with the MSBA audit. On page 7, you see a breakdown of the debt service for all of our 10 member towns. And the second from the bottom, and it's listed alphabetically, certainly not by any listing of how we favor our communities. You can see that Spencer's debt assessment for fiscal year 2017 will be $140,445. Page 8 is again old information on the 3 borrowings that we did, the initial 3 borrowings. We returned over $500,000 in excess bond premiums to our towns. If we do receive any bond premiums with the permanent financing of the $3 million, the net of costs will again be returned to our 10-member towns. But you can see here in Spencer's case, over the course of the 3 borrowings we did, we returned to Spencer $49,176. Page 9 shows the student population at Bay Path and compares the foundation enrollment between fiscal year 2017 and fiscal year 2016. We have 12 less students factored into our foundation enrollment, or a 1.5% decrease. Page 10 shows our freshman seat allocation and how we've broken out the freshmen that will be coming in the fall. We're anticipating taking in 310 freshmen. Spencer's share of those seats is 27 students. Now your final count could end up being greater than 27 or less than 27. If there are, although these are guaranteed seats to each of the towns, but not all of our towns fill their seats. So if some seats remain vacant, those are then awarded to students that are on a waiting list from our other towns. So here's our budget summary on page 11, and how we get to the $20,841,414 budget that is currently been approved by the school committee and will be proposed at town meetings. $10,107,282 in Chapter 70 funding, less the $170,155 in school choice. We're assessing our member towns $7,701,847, and that is the minimum contribution amounts. We're recommending E&D to fund our OPEB transfer of $50,000. Also, to increase the budget, $84,702, which brings our operational total to $17,773,676. Transportation budget is estimated at this point to be $1,384,337. $906,407 will come to us in the form of Chapter 71 aid. The balance is the transportation assessment to our member communities of $477,930. The debt, which consists of principal and interest of $1,588,741. Then on top of that, we have the buy-in assessment of $63,910 and a sewer betterment fee of $30,750. And that's what makes up our $20.8 million budget. On page 12, you see all of our member towns' assessments. Again, second from the bottom, you can see Spencer's minimum contribution amount of $991,365. See a transportation assessment of $64,790. Your debt service payment of $140,445. Capital improvement, and your share of that $30,750 is $2,718, and the capital buy-in of $34,130, which makes up your total assessment of $1,233,448. On page 13, we've given you a comparison of your assessment change, and you can see for Spencer, your assessment has increased 8.77%, and in a minute I'll explain to you how that happened, because when you look at your student population, you don't see that type of an increase. You are being assessed, or your minimum contribution is being increased because you are below your target share of where the Chapter 70 formula feels the town of Spencer should be funding education. So again, that's a function of the state, not of the district, and I'll show you that in a minute in a later slide. So we really are at a hold-fast budget this year. We're pleased to say that we will be maintaining all of our programs and all of our student activity offerings. We feel that we are adequately provisioning all of our shops and classrooms, even though they are all seeing reductions in their appropriations for next year over this year. We will be implementing a dental assisting program and adding that as a 22nd shop in the fall. And we've hired the staff, the teacher for that, who's developing the curriculum now and purchasing all of the supplies. And for those of you who've come through the building, you can see that shop was part of the addition renovation project. So we'll be welcoming students for the first time into dental assisting in September.
Will that be high school or post?
No, that's high school.
High school?
Yes. So we're pretty excited about that. Now, normally at this point, we painstakingly go through the Chapter 70 formula, and I'd certainly be happy to do that for you if you'd like. But if you want the 10-cent tour of the Chapter 70 funding, if you actually take the time, begin reading on page 16 and walk through the calculation, you'll actually see how Spencer's numbers are arrived at, not only for Bay Path, but for your local regional school as well. But what I want to really focus on, unless there are any questions, I'll ask that you turn to page 21 and look at the very last bullet that is on page 21, and I'll read it. If your preliminary contribution amount is below by more than 7.5%, an additional 2% is added to your preliminary contribution. And I've highlighted this section. For those below by between 2.5% and 7.5%, 1% is added, and that's where Spencer's shortfall comes in. And you can see this if you move then to page 26. Spencer's shortfall from the target share is 4.51%. Now you can, on the previous page, you can walk through the calculation if you'd like. And again, repeating that, if the shortfall from target is between 2.5% and 7.5%, 1% is added. Now, 1% of what? They take this current year's required local contribution, which for Spencer is $6,810,416. So 1% of that is $68,104. That is added to your fiscal year 17 preliminary contribution, which the Chapter 70 formula dictated at $7,091,686. So it increased your required contribution to $71,159,790. So that $68,000 is what is more than 2/3 of the $98,000 increase that you saw in your assessment.
And the other issue, Dean, is on page 25, municipal revenues grew at 4.13% for Spencer. Now,
Correct.
I haven't looked at what the other towns have done, but, so that brought you up from your required contribution of 6.8 million to 7.1. So between the municipal growth of 4.13 and the penalty, that's almost $400,000 right now.
So that's where you're really seeing the impact to Spencer. Now, again, I can certainly back up and walk through the entire calculation if you'd like. If you notice then, and you go to page 28, you can see how this required contribution of $7,159,790 is spread amongst your three educational components of your budget. You have, I believe, 5 students attending out of district. It must be to one of the agricultural schools, or maybe to
Not-
several of them.
Not with,
We're going down to 4 and if I said.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
must be excited about that. We need to get a life out of
Somebody graduates. I check every year, what grade is that kid in?
yeah.
$27,190 is allocated to those 5 students. Your minimum or your required contribution for the Spencer East Brookfield Regional School District is $6,141,236, and then 13.85% of that comes to Baypath at $991,365. Now, if you were to turn back to, this better work, I didn't check it. But if you were to turn back to page, I had to turn back to. Here we go. You turn back to page 12, and you look in your very first column under the minimum contribution amount in the portion of that assessment at $991,365. It comes from the required contribution of $7,159,790, and that's Baypath's share of that at 13.85%.
And as I said, when Spencer East Brookfield was here, this is set at the state level.
That's correct.
It's before you people, it has nothing to do with what you do with your money once you get it, or what Spencer East Brookfield does with their money. The state sets these numbers,
That's correct.
and the formulas are indescribable.
Right now, we've also included for you, and as Mrs. Brainy had said, I would say now, probably about a month ago, or several weeks ago, we mailed you our line item budget, and which has a comparison between the current year's appropriation, our current year expenses, and then the proposed budget for fiscal year 2017. And then a lot of this data that we just really went over quickly is attached. But I also included in the packet a summary of each of the town's assessments, comparing them to 2016. So you not only get Spencer's information, but you get the other 9 towns as well. You can see what's happening with their assessments. So I think at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. I know I went through a ton of information in a very short amount of time.
What are you guys hearing for regional transportation reimbursement in the budget?
I've not heard anything.
Anything?
I would like to believe that I don't believe a Democratic legislature will be out-trumped by a Republican governor, so that I'm hoping that the number that the governor put through is a a low number.
Yeah, right.
And won't be reduced. But that seems to be the low-hanging fruit, that whenever they wanna make cuts, they go right to regional school transportation. But we're pretty hopeful that that number's gonna stick.
What's the law says they're supposed to fund 90%, 100%?
No, the law says 100%,
100%.
but it ends
They-
with the caveat, subject to
Right,
appropriation.
exactly.
And now they're at about 70%, which is much
Well,
better
it's-
than it has been in past years,
Yeah.
I can say that.
Yeah, but,
And former Senator Brewer was very instrumental in restoring funding under Chapter
Chapter
71.
yeah, right.
There is no attempt to, in the governor's budget, address any of the issues that came up in the Foundation Budget Commission
Right.
report. And we were in Boston today, several of the school committee members, and I spoke with several of our representatives advocating for them to start picking some of that, for example, health insurance. Something that would impact all school districts, not just vocational. And from my perspective, I think the health insurance is a no-brainer. It's kind of easy to get your hands around. Let's start funding that. But, their pushback is that there's still some structural issues with the state budget in terms of balancing it. So we'll see. I'm fairly confident Chapter 70 will go up some. Again, to Bay Path, let's say they went, part of a proposal I heard was go from $20 minimum to $50. Okay, so that goes from 20 to 30 to 50,000, a $30,000 increase. We're happy for it, but again, because where we're at, $50,000, that isn't a lot of money either.
Right,
So-
and if they don't adjust the foundation budget, then that would merely mean that that additional $22,000 would get distributed to the 10 towns in the form of a lower assessment.
Right.
It wouldn't impact our budget, unfortunately,
So.
for us.
As we look to next year already, because we're looking past this year is minimum, we are going to probably do something we haven't done, and that is build the budget more from a basis of need, because right now we're at pretty much a level we can't get below without personnel cuts. And I know you folks have probably been through personnel cuts over the years. We will probably be setting the budget as to, okay, what do we need, and how can we balance that with the needs of the towns, rather than saying, okay, we can live with minimum, if it's another budget like this. And then we'll have the discussion, if it's not reasonable, what do we do?
And, right, and that is going to be an important discussion. Already, 2 years ago, over the past 2 or 3 years, our town services have been cut drastically. This was the year we had hoped that we would begin to get a toe in the door. Our town hall is open 3 days a week. We were hoping a little bit more. Our library is open 4 days a week. To say nothing of other services that have been cut. And this year, based on the fact that your assessment, the foundation budget, the minimum local, and Spencer East Brookfield District, that pretty much takes our new growth. That's about all there is. And so all the other town departments are pretty much hanging on by their fingernails right now.
Imagine. Yep.
So we are in dire straits. We have a town that prefers not to pay for anything that they don't feel like paying for. So, it's gonna be a question, it's gonna be very difficult. I would say one thing I would ask is, would we wind up having to limit the number of students? I know that would send them back to Spencer East Brookfield, but, is that something, and I'm not asking for, I'm
Yeah.
just throwing that, is that something we have to be?
From a legal point of view, all students are entitled to vocational education, and I think part of the viewpoint here is that if you didn't have Bay Path, you'd be finding yourself, for example, like the town of Leicester, who once they chose not to join us, busing them, at least at one point, they were busing most of them to Assabet. I don't know if that's shifted a little bit with Tantascwa taking more kids, something like that. So the bottom line is, and I haven't looked at the figure recently, but for many, many years, Spencer was paying less after joining us than before joining us.
Absolutely.
Oh, no question.
And so in terms of the limiting of students, legally, a student can't be limited. relative to vocational. That's why
Mhm.
you're sending some out.
They're gonna go somewhere,
Right,
they're not gonna go to Bay
And
Path.
that's, I mean,
They're
and,
gonna
but
find a program somewhere
that's a
else.
question that's going to be answered.
Yep.
I
Yep.
can assure you.
Yep.
And then, so, overall, school populations are declining. I mean, there are just fewer kids, that's that. So the best you can hope for with overall decline, and you have 12 fewer this year or something like that?
That's
Yeah,
a,
Is-
that's a little
Yeah.
misleading. That's
Right.
more, those 12 are a result of less kids going to Tantascwa
Oh,
from
okay, all right.
our 10 sending towns, because we pay for that. So if a student goes either from, most of it is, what town is it? Is it Spencer? Yeah. So a lot of, you still have a lot of kids going to Tantascwa that end up in the vocational program. Those count on this, we pay the school choice
Oh,
to
so
them
if they go to Tantascwa for a program that you offer,
for vocational.
Right, or a program that we don't offer.
Right, any
well,
vocational
no, the
program.
ones that you don't offer, but we pay,
Yeah, can you explain that, cause
Tantascwa.
we
Yeah, we pay for
we
it.
pay out-of-district
Out of
vocational tuition and
Right.
transportation for
Right.
3 students that attend.
Because they went for they
For
went
programs that are not
specifically
offered.
for that.
Yep.
As opposed to a student who gets into the junior high at Tantascwa under choice, under the choice program.
okay.
So then they go to the high school as a choice student, they get on our registers as choice. As opposed to a young
I
person
was wondering why you guys haven't.
Yeah, me
in the
too.
9th grade, if Sally wants to go there for something we're not offering, and that's happened,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
you say, 3 times, you said?
Yeah.
Those go to you on out-of-district tuition, as opposed to the kids who are going in through the choice option. So Tantascwa can't say to a young person who's in the 7th grade, when they get to the 9th grade, oh, you want vocational, so now you have to be out-of-district tuition.
Right,
They come on to us as out-of-district,
As choose-
as
school
choice.
choice.
school choice.
And we have a lot of that
Since I was
from
wondering.
North Brookfield too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had that on your list, when I got to that on my list, I was gonna ask
So I
about
think
that,
there's
yeah.
about 30, I think the state's count this year is about 34.
30. Hmm.
So,
And I just wanted, could you talk, just again, I'm sorry, the 84,702 from E&D toward your operating budget? Could you just, we try not to use one-time revenues for
Well, we do too,
operating
except for the fact,
expenses.
as Dean said, and as we've said to the committee many years, we're still about 4.5%.
Actually, it's a little
Oh,
higher.
that's right,
It's
net
almost
school said,
4.8%.
net school said.
Well, I'm just making a guess
Right.
this year, but
Yeah.
the last figure was 4.8% below net school spending. So we're only spending 95.2% of what the state says we should.
Right.
So,
And if we breach that 5% mark, our chapter 70 will actually be cut.
Be cut,
but our
right.
mandate to spend won't
Right.
be.
Right.
Because
So-
since we're assessing all of our towns the minimum level,
Yep.
we are at the net, if we spend every penny of our budgeted money, we have no gain, but we would have no penalty either. If we have $10 left in the account at the end of the year, it adds on to the amount that we are below our net school spending
So really, in
level.
an odd sort of way, there is a gain. So if you spend every cent they tell you to spend, you're not penalized.
Right.
Right,
So it's just an odd way around.
Yeah.
right.
But because we accumulated that deficit over years,
Yep.
we every year for probably the foreseeable future, we gotta put a little bit more than, and rather than adding it to the minimum, to the towns, we take it out of E&D.
So how do you, I was gonna say, how do you generate your E&D if you're trying to spend to the full number?
Well, we don't spend
You
that
don't-
full
I mean,
number every
Yeah,
year.
and then we don't budget interest.
Would you find yourself in that
Right.
position where you're trying to balance what you spend and having E&D?
Yeah, we don't budget every single penny of revenue,
Right,
because the minute we start budgeting every
Yes,
single
yeah.
penny of revenue and it
You
doesn't
lose
come
it.
in,
Right.
we're in a
we're the
deficit,
same way.
and we haven't spent the money, so now it's a triple whammy. So we didn't get the money, we
Yeah.
didn't spend it, now we're gonna get penalized.
Yeah.
But it's the
Yeah.
same as
We're the
yours,
same way. We're the same
budgetary
way.
reversions, we don't budget for interest earnings, and then each year we get probably somewhere in the area of $15,000 to $20,000 in revenue we just weren't expecting to get.
Right,
And it goes in
By
as
recovery,
unclassified.
something like
Yeah.
that, you know,
gotcha.
so when you're running,
Same way.
raise a thing. So, you know, I understand, Mary, and believe me, we're still very, very cognizant that a number of our towns are in tough shape. 18 years that I've been there, we've never gone over minimum. And then, so at some point, we have to do the due diligence, and again, maybe the economy's gonna perk up and we're gonna all be in heaven again, but, if not, we have to do the due diligence of, you know, what programs do we either have to cut or those kinds of things.
And actually, that's really the way to look at the budget. What do you need to do
Right.
to educate the students? You know, that's.
And we've been very fortunate and thankful that the minimum has been able to do that. But again, over 18 years, you know, if you look at, my benchmark is never what somebody else is doing. I really don't operate that way. But if you look at our vocational brethren, and certainly our academic school systems, there aren't many left that are operating at minimum, because those fixed costs, like health insurance, are well above what the state says is the foundation. Now, we were fortunate last year, or 2 years ago?
2 years ago
2 years
now.
ago, we went into the Hampshire County Group Insurance Trust, and our health insurance went down like 11 to 12%, something like that.
I
Actually, a
remember
little bit more, yeah. It's
talking
almost
about
$400,000.
when, just before you
Right.
went into
So
Savings
this
in
year,
health
I don't know what
insurance.
you folks are experiencing, we're at 8.6.
12.8.
Okay.
And we're in a group purchasing arrangement with many of the towns and some school districts, and most of the towns were double digits this year.
And
we're still stuck with probably just doing that.
and a good part of that is Obamacare
Yes, correct.
charges kicking in. Of our 8%, 3% is just that.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but we're all in the same boat. We're trying to row with you, not against you, so.
Yeah.
Right, oh, exactly, and we recognize that too, but, that's the reality.
Right.
It's the reality of our situation.
Yep.
It's pretty dire right now. Well, but on the other side of it, so this year, the sewer betterment fee, but it's the last year of the capital buy-in, so next year, there'll be a little bit of a help with the sewer betterment, because we'll be out of the capital buy-in,
Right.
and maybe what you ask for in, if you need to ask for an increase in minimum local, it won't be more than 30,000. Right?
One can
It
hope.
won't be a wash.
I
One
think you
can
know
hope.
us,
Yeah.
well enough to know, we don't ask for anything we don't need.
Right, right.
And we're willing to take some pain too. I don't want you to think we're sitting here saying, oh, we're gonna keep everything we have here, and we're just gonna ask for more money. There are areas
I
where,
don't, I mean,
you know.
no, I don't think that you,
But-
Luckily, you haven't had to do that.
yeah, you
Right.
haven't had to, so you're starting from a stronger point.
Yep,
and-
absolutely.
And that
No
helps.
doubt
Yep.
about it.
Can I just ask you about special education? Do you have some of the special education, expenses that the towns?
Well, we have the same expenses with the exception of out-of-district residential placements. We don't have any of that. I think somewhere near, 25% of our students?
25% are on IEPs, but the district agreement makes it very clear that any student that requires either special placement outside of the school day, you know, to like a Southern Worcester County Educational,
Yeah.
or an overnight, that has to stay with the town. There's a couple of reasons for that. Number one is that it would be unfair, for a number of reasons, if we were then taking students and placing them in out-of-district placements, and a propensity of them came from Spencer, none came from Auburn, and we're asking Auburn to share it.
Mhm.
The other issue is that although 26% of our kids are on IEPs, obviously, we have some limitations relative to safety, in terms of, now, we have plenty of kids with autism, for example, in our school district. They excel, especially in a lot of the computer application type programs. But kids with physical disabilities, for example, would not be safe in some of our shops. So you have to balance that, and really, those decisions need to be made by the sending district. But no, we don't have any of the heavy cost of, we have aides in our classroom,
Mhm.
we have
Yeah,
special
multi-
education teachers, where we have
Services.
two
Mhm.
teachers in a classroom. But once you get into the heavy-duty out-of-district placements, those have to remain with the towns.
And I think that's, that's one of those things that doesn't always get said clearly, and
Yep.
it's obvious that, it has to be there.
I mean, I could foresee, and I'm not suggesting any town in my district would do it, but I could foresee that if the regional school in any area were responsible for paying out-of-district special education costs, a town could say, okay, we're gonna kind of not force, but we're gonna encourage kids who need that out-of-district, let the vocational school district pay for it, they'll spread it among 10 towns. And again, those kinds of decisions and the impact, which requires school districts to come up with solutions, are best left at the local.
two other, does anybody else have any?
I just wonder about the agricultural part, any news on that, or?
We'll be meeting in May again with Senator Goby and the group. The real stumbling block to that, quite frankly, is the capital cost of housing a program. And certainly, we're not capable of asking for millions more on top of the 73 million we just did. So, to be honest with you, I don't know where that will go. If the state were amenable to doing something, there are some good options or alternatives being discussed. But like everything else, they require money. So we'll be working with Ann and see what happens. It's been a slow go at this point.
Anybody else? I have two more that are kind of off, a little bit off the exact budget.
If I can ask a question to the chair, your healthcare expense. When we went through our process with the regional school district, one area we asked them to review was retiree benefits and contributions of both the retirees and employees. What's your contribution right now for your employees for their health care?
Well, we're at 50-50 for retirees, and I forget the exact year, about 9 years ago, we went from an 85-15 to a
75-25.
70-30.
70-30, you're right. I'm sorry.
70-30 with a grandfather for the older employees.
But we
So,
now have more employees paying at the
70-30.
30% contribution rate than,
That's good.
15%.
That was a nut we had to crack on the regional side.
and we also, from time to time, as I'm sure the town does, raise co-pays and those kinds of things. But we still have a very good plan, but as Dean says, I didn't see the figures, but apparently we're over 50% of the people being at the 70-30 level.
Yeah, 50-50 is.
Yeah, for the retirees, it's 50-50.
That's impressive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
So, I have a couple, just two things. One is the thing with the gasoline.
MBTE.
MBTE,
Yes.
yes.
So we've been working with the town on this for a number of years now, and we were under the impression that the town was continuing to negotiate with Exxon. Exxon had some sort of a spill many, many moons ago. And in the area between Route 20 and the school, if you were coming off Route 20 to get to us, there are some areas in there that have high concentrations of MBTE. Since 2008, Exxon has monitored our water on a monthly basis. And we've ranged from last month, 0 detect, to a high of 6 parts per billion. And the DEP level limit is 70 parts per billion. Now, we did not know, we were not aware until we read the telegram in the Gazette that there was some sort of falling out between the town and Exxon, and actually since apparently October, there have been no negotiations. So, obviously you read the news, and my 1,000 parents have read the news, and they're concerned. Even though, technically speaking, the water is completely safe, and I drink 2 pitchers of it every day. One, I did it even on Channel 3, but it didn't help. So the school building committee, which is heavily made up of school committee members as well, we got together 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah,
2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And they decided to finish the filtration system. So in the back parking lot, we had put a lot of piping in that back parking lot over the summer during the construction because we wanted to be ready to accept the municipal water when it comes. In addition, there was some piping to our, we have an arsenic filter already on the water because we have arsenic in the water. So there was some additional piping for that. So for about $13,000, using some of our own forces, we're going to finish putting in the MBTE filters. And that will be done no later than May 1st, at which time there'll be no MBTE at all getting into the building.
And I guess, and as concerned as I am about the MBTE, I was also concerned about the funding.
Yeah,
With
the
that,
funding is in,
That's not something that we're gonna see coming, you
No.
got that covered.
We've
yeah, the
already
funding
got
is
that
in the
in this
building
year's
project. And once it's completely hooked up, we'll also be talking with Exxon saying, what can you do for us? But no, it's not gonna have an impact on this budget.
And the other thing is, because you were on the Foundation Budget Committee, could you just say a couple?
On the what?
The
I'm sorry?
Foundation
Oh.
Budget Study Committee, could you just say a couple words about that? And is there something we can do to nudge the legislators along and what
Well-
would be appropriate, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's important for you to know, and this hasn't really been said, but we're amongst friends, so I can say it.
We're on TV.
The committee met several times and of course looked at, the function of the committee was to look at what areas of the so-called foundation budget are causing school districts to be underfunded because the cost of providing the service is higher than the foundation budget allows. So obviously, health insurance was a big item. If you look at what the overall foundation budget allows or anticipates the cost of health insurance, it's well below what the actual cost is. And the primary reason for that, if you look at the causes for it, is because the foundation budget overall has a cost of living factor determined by federal government figures, really COLAs. Whereas health insurance, as you're finding out this year and almost every year prior, is much, much higher than the general cost of living. So you're going up 12%, 12.8% this year. The cost of living normal has gone up about 1.5%, 2%. So over the years, that's how that got out of balance. So that's one area that we know is bad. Special education. Now, folks get a little confused because the foundation budget right now, and you'll forgive me, the exact number, is like 4.5% assumed special education population. What people don't understand, when you say that 4.5%, that doesn't mean there's 4.5% of your students getting special education. The budget, the foundation budget, always looked at an average special education student spending 1/4 of their day receiving special education services. So 4 times the 4.5 assumed 18%, okay? Really, we're at 20, 22, 24%, depending on the type of school. So the Foundation Commission recommended bringing that up, 0.5% for each of the vocational schools, and because ours is a little higher than the academic schools. Because don't forget, the foundation budget is not looking at out-of-district placements when they're talking special education. They're covering that under the circuit breaker, okay? Even though it's 4 times the regular cost before the circuit breaker kicks in. That's what so that's outside the foundation budget. Low income and ELL learners are the other areas that are really underfunded. And in the case of the ELL, it doesn't impact really Spencer and Bay Path as much as if you go to some of the Chelseas of the world. Okay, they have thousands of kids in Chelsea that come in October, leave in December, come back, and somebody else comes back. And so all those costs and the intensive services that are required to help those students are not being captured in the budget. So the commission looked at all those and said, these are the types of things that need to be changed. And in most of those, we recommended how to change them. Some of them we said, leave it up to the legislature because quite frankly, we couldn't come to an agreement on it. That's the good thing. The bad thing about the Foundation Budget Commission that towns don't really understand is when that foundation budget goes up, so does the local contribution, okay? So now, I think the unrestricted aid is up 4% this year from in the
4.3, yeah.
4.3, whereas the foundation budget is down 0.22% or 0.34%, something like that. When you looked at when the COLA that they used, they actually brought it down. So there's a little more money on the aid side, depending on how you look at it. But if the foundation budget goes up, the local contribution is going to go up as well.
We're up, but we're still at 2002 levels.
Right. Now, again, and I don't know what the local school district does, but about 80% of the towns and cities are paying above the minimum. So, in some respects, those districts would get more aid, but their requirement wouldn't surpass what they're already paying. But when you have a district that's at minimum, that means you're going up and the aid is going up if the foundation budget increases, okay? So for us, when we go, if that were to happen, and we think it should, for the simple reason that we are paying a lot of cost that isn't captured and being taken out of the classroom, quite frankly. But for us, we will have to explain why the foundation budget going up means more money from the town of Spencer to Bay Path, from the town of Paxton to Bay Path, those kinds of things. The minimum, but again, I think there's less than 20% of the school districts are at minimum. So the towns, a lot of them would be held harmless, they would get more aid. The other thing that we tossed around that never made it into the report was the fact that you have a lot of communities that are very wealthy, that this formula, which was not part of the foundation commission, the formula was not part of it. Okay, everybody thought we were looking at the formula, we did not. But the formula mandates 15% funding of local schools in every town. Well, some of those towns should be only getting 5% reimbursed by the town, but they're getting 15%. And that's a lot of money being diverted to communities that are much wealthier than Spencer, for example, or much wealthier than South.
They're 50-60% over the minimum, and they're still getting 15% from the state.
Right. So there's still a lot of inequities, but it is important to note, we did not spend 1 minute looking at the formula. Some of us brought it up, but it was outside the legislative mandate, so it wasn't discussed.
Even though some of us testified about it.
Right,
Yeah.
right, I remember that.
And the testimony is still there, and we did say that, we felt, one recommendation we made, which hasn't been addressed, is that we need to have these committees every 2 or 3 years to keep things, and to address the actual formula. Because it gets very convoluted, and the longer you wait to address a formula, any formula, not just the Chapter 70 formula, the more it diverges from reality. So.
I know I've spent more than my fair share of time on the DESI website looking at some of this stuff, and it's just frustrating, really.
And lastly, some of you may have read the article about post-secondary programs and vocational schools.
Right.
And just to reiterate, I only got a little blurb in there, but just to reiterate, what we do at Bay Path is we have 2 post-secondary programs. We offer LPN program and a cosmetology program. Okay, those are for people over 18. The LPN program runs every August to June. It's 5 nights a week, and those individuals get an LPN certification at the end of that program. 95% of them pass their boards for their nurse license on the first try, and the other 5% have all passed on a second try. The cost to go to that is $13,500. None of that is in the foundation budget or our operating budget. The students do have access to Pell Grants and student loans if they qualify. Pell Grants are based on income. Student loans, some are subsidized, some are not. And again, that's based on income as well. And then they can also get third-party loans if they need to. And basically the same thing for the cosmetology. I'm not sure how long that one runs, to be honest with you. They have to get 1,500 hours in, so however long it takes to get that 1,500 hours, and that's a cost of $8,000. And again, there's no money at all coming from our towns. Just like with the evening school program itself, I have now split the evening school program director. We used to have a full-time director for the evening school only. That person does half-time evening school and half-time cooperative education. In other words, getting our students in the day program jobs. Right now we have 100 seniors and second semester juniors who are working in their trade in a private company for pay. So rather than come to Bay Path the week that they would be in the shop, they go to a private company and do work. So all of my machine tool technology students, not one of them is coming to school, they're all going to work in machine shops in the area. And if I had 20 more of them, I could put them all out to work. That's how much work there is. You might have seen that we received a grant of $300,000 recently to upgrade the equipment in the machine tool shop. That's going to be added with a $150,000 anonymous gift from a manufacturer, plus $50,000 from our equipment. So we're going to spend $500,000 between now and summertime, and we'll be putting 14 new computer numeric control machines in the shop. We have some, and they're very, very good machines, but they're very, very old, from the 1930s, lathes and so forth, that you can't buy anymore because they're that well made. Some of them will be converted to CNC, others we'll have to replace. We will keep a couple of the old ones because the freshmen need to learn the concept behind the machine before they start programming. It's easy to program if you're good with computers, But if you don't know what you're doing when you're programming it, you're just wasting more material quicker than if you were making a
Right.
mistake on a manual machine. But the state had put together a couple of years ago 5 certificates. They call them levels 1 through 5. MACWIC is the acronym. I forget what the acronym stands for. There are 53 shops in central Massachusetts that say, if a person comes to them with a level 1 MACWIC certificate, they will have a job. No questions asked. Now, the 2 through 5 allow them to do even more advanced things, and the employer knows, okay, we can put them over here rather than put them here and train them. But all of my juniors this year took and passed the level 1 MACWIC. So they could go out right now and get a job in one of 53 shops in central Massachusetts. They've agreed to recognize that. One of our students, one of our juniors, got a 95%, there's 5 parts to each level, 5 tests. There were 300 kids across the state that took the exam. 5 of them scored 90 or above in all 5 of those sections. And we had a young man at Bay Path do that. So we're very proud of that, and with this new upgrade, it's gonna make it even better for them. But, you know, this level 1, they're working with micrometers, they're working with blueprint reading, the basic stuff that if you went into a shop, you still have to do today. So,
Do you have any 3D printers?
yes, we have 2 of them, and that's in the drafting shop. In fact, there should have been an article in the New Leader recently. We had 5 of our students just did a project for this gentleman. He's a NASA educator, so he gives free seminars on all the things that NASA does. And the kids, these 5 kids in our drafting shop, drafted the rover that's on Mars. They didn't have any of the dimensions. They had to do this and get it to a point, and they printed it on the 3D printer. Right now, it's on display at the Savers Bank in Southbridge, but this gentleman would be taking, we've done a lot of things for him, but this was 300 hours worth of printing, and then all the drafting that went with it.
Impressive.
Yeah. So yesterday, we had 40 senior citizens from the town of Paxton. We sent a bus to the Paxton Senior Center. We picked them up, brought them to the school at 10 o'clock. Mr. Yakabuchi, 2 other folks, and myself gave them a 1.5-hour tour of the facility, which blew their socks off, because a lot of them were thinking it's the old-time vocational school. Then, for $4, we gave them a nice meal in the new restaurant, and we sent them home on the bus. I bring that up for 2 reasons. One is, not that all of you are senior citizens. None of you are. But you're all welcome to pick up the phone, talk to Mr. Zukowski or Mr. Wheeler, say, hey, I'd like to see the school. You come down, we'll give you a personal tour of the school, and we'll buy you lunch. That's if you come alone. If you come on our bus,
You come on a bus.
if you come on a bus, we gotta charge you.
You're on your own,
But we
yeah.
would like to reach out, probably at the beginning of the next school year, to the Spencer Senior Center. I don't know who the director is,
Pam Woodbury, yeah.
okay? And I don't know if they have a,
Jimmy Latown is the chief.
yeah, if they have a
Mr.
travel
Chairman.
arm, you know, there's a person that, I used to be a senior center director, Adam, even when I was younger than you are now. We always had somebody in charge of trips. Well, this turned out to be a very nice trip. The people couldn't believe what they saw, because we have 22 fully equipped shops. And that's why this budget is a little higher per student than it is for an academic school, because I'm replacing machines at $50,000 a pop. But if I don't, these kids can't work, and that's what we're there for, get them to work.
Great.
So,
My in-laws used to go to lunch down there with, they lived in Oxford, and they had a group of friends, and
Yeah.
they regularly, at least once a month.
yeah, well, if they haven't been lately, tell them the restaurant's all.
No, they're no longer with us.
Oh,
but-
okay. Well,
They're there in spirit.
they've already seen it, just from a different
That's
angle,
right,
that's all. But really, you should, if you have, we're open Tuesday through Friday from 11 to 12:30, or by private reservation at extension 1710. And we'd be happy to have you up and take a look at what you're investing in.
Thank you.
Mary, also to mention that Bay Path will be involved in downtown beautification. I'm sure John Stevens has talked to you folks. We intend on buying a bunch of planters
Oh, good.
from you folks and,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
set
Now
them up
the,
down Main Street.
The town of Southbridge, recreation director met with us either today or tomorrow. But what they're doing in Southbridge is they're getting local groups, Rotary, Lions clubs, to adopt a playground or a park, and once a month have that organization responsible to clean it. And Bay Path has told them that our building and grounds department, students, facilities, we used to call it facilities, they changed the name on me all the time. We're gonna adopt a park, and during the school year, we will send the kids down there. They take care of our grounds, so we said, okay, but if the town ever thought of something along those lines,
Well, now that you mentioned
Now
it,
that you mention
either
it.
John or myself are to come to you folks. I talked, Mr. Zukowski at Price Chopper, I think he was trying to hide from me,
he does that to me too, don't feel offended.
Maybe you could adopt something block with us, because we wanna beautify that place and
Yeah.
prepare it again for getting it rented or for another RFP.
Yeah.
That would include cleaning, some painting.
Absolutely, we just finished, that same department just finished a big project over at Bartlett High School. Bartlett used to have a vocational component way back when, and so they had a lot of extra space, and so we went down, we knocked down all the walls, did a lot of work on the ceilings and the floors. Then coming behind them, our electricians are there, and we're hoping, we got denied a permit by the State Plumbing Board, but we have appealed it, we're going tomorrow. And, you know, all of our legislators, including Ann and others, have written to them saying, hey, what the heck you doing? But I'll get it. So the answer is, when you're ready to discuss what it is you want to do in that area, call me, I'll put you in touch with Don Montville, we'll get the folks out here to do that. We did, many years ago when I first got to Bay Path, what was the name of it? Vets Taxi Cab, which was a building downtown south.
Yep.
Which they owned that building, because prior to me getting to Bay Path, I took it for taxes. So, you know, hey, after we took it, we also, Bay Path renovated it for them. So there's a lot of things we can do. You need to be patient with us. We have a long list of friends that need help, but we're more than happy to do that. We're in Rutland right now. We just converted an open basement that they had at the Rutland Library into a TV studio. 1/3 of it's a TV studio, 1/3 is a Board of Selectmen's office, and 1/3 of it is for the Health Department and another group that have offices down there. So we can do a lot, we just have to be patient.
Excellent.
And if you're interested, we can talk to you about a building we have available.
I'm always interested, I just don't have much money.
Right. Well, if no one else, or does anyone else have any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming. I have to share this with everybody. No, by the time this is on TV, this will be happening the next day. But on Sunday, I don't know if all of you have heard about this, but the Mass Memories Roadshow in Spencer, you can bring 3 pieces of memorabilia that relate to Spencer. There's more information on the back, and anyone's welcome enough to live in town. It just has to be something related to Spencer. Yep, yep. So.
Very good.
Anyone wants to come, or any of your
You've been
Spencer
served.
students?
Yes,
Yeah,
All right, well,
yeah.
great to see you again.
Thanks for coming.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome,
Thank
and
you.
do get in touch with Mark Patel. We'll be happy to do what we can.
That's good parts too.
Yeah, we had the seniors down for that tour, I went to a couple of shops, and I asked a student, would you tell us what you do down there? These students, oh my God, they're great, you know, they just, the machine tool kid took them through and tell them, this machine is this machine is that. And, electronics, huh? They have a Vex Robotics program.
And the
This
student
junior, oh
who
my God.
designed and built it.
I wish I was him, you know what I mean? Because that kid's gonna have a future. He's tall, he's good looking, and he's smart. I look at it this way, 1 out of 3 isn't bad.
Oh, yeah.
I'd prefer to be good looking
You
anyway.
pick which one, 'cause I'm not touching that one. I think you're tall.
You want a job tomorrow, right?
It's all relative.
Thank you.
We do this every month.
Thank you very much.
It's a show.
Yeah,
This
this,
show's on the road,
this
right?
month I have to write a book. It's time for evaluation, so I gotta give my evaluation. Have a good
That time of
night.
year.
Thank you, Joe.
You can see our school district is in good hands with having this.
Oh, absolutely.
We appreciate your service too, gentlemen. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I'm up for re-election, in case you don't know who to
Not
vote
to
for.
worry.
Your liaison to the board.
Ah, I was gonna say, I didn't think you did that.
I did it 1 week.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night, folks.
Good night.
On my agenda, I buried it somewhere.
Back to the minutes?
Yep, back to the minutes while I'm looking for the agenda.
we got a full house.
very efficiently, quickly, where I could find it quickly. All right, so we deferred to the minutes until we had a quorum, and now we have a quorum. So the minutes of the March 22nd, 2016 meeting. Anyone care to make a motion regarding those?
Make a motion to accept them as written.
Okay. Second?
I'll second.
Don't you ever go home?
I live here, I think.
That's what
I
his
think
wife
so.
says, yeah.
I feel sorry for your wife.
Oh, you please don't bring that up on camera.
Look what he said. Oh, I'm sorry.
Any changes to the minutes, questions, comments, et cetera? All in favor of approving, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody, any opposed? Okay. Approved. Thank you. There is no correspondence. The liaison reports, Financial Management Planning Committee.
I'll let Adam.
Sure, the update is, and I'll go through it real quick when I do the list of articles for the warrant, but the Financial Management Planning Committee, as you know, has been working on the Comprehensive Roads Project. Paul sits on that committee in addition to Tom Parker, and then Tony Pepe, who's here from the Board of Selectmen, along with John Stevens, and then Rich Hepson from Capital sit on that committee, and we've been working since November on trying to get information out there about a comprehensive roads project. We've had 3 public hearings that were all very successful in terms of information that we put out there and then the feedback that we received. That all came to a head last night with the Board of Selectmen when they voted to set a debt exclusion question. The borrowing is for $19 million, which is one of the 3 options that we put out there. So you'll have a ballot question this year on the ballot related to the debt. That's a debt exclusion question, and then you'll have articles that I'll touch on in a second here regarding the borrowing for that. So that's kind of the end product in terms of all the feedback that we received from residents. We'll have additional information that we're working on to get, now that it's specific to what it's going to be, we're working hard behind the scenes to get that information out there and to what that all means to the voters and to the taxpayers. So thanks to Paul for all your work with that, coming to a lot of the meetings, and Tony as well. Tom was not here, but so we're moving forward.
Capital planning, you'll have a report for us, you don't have it tonight. You do.
Capital planning, I do
Capital
not.
planning,
So there'll be an article and there'll be a draft warrant sheet next meeting that you have on the
Yep.
12th for the budget. So the capital committee's done their rankings, they've done their part. Nancy Herholtz is your representative from the finance committee. And that's now in the hands of the Board of Selectmen, who have the recommendations from me in terms of the funding sources for those items that have been ranked by the capital planning committee.
nothing to report with the school committee, they have a meeting tonight, that's the report on asbestos, that's being held at the school, or maybe it's already, it started at 7 o'clock at the school this evening. Other than that, they met with us last week, so, you all are up to date on that. Still nothing on the DPHS building committee. But Building and Property Reuse Advisory Committee?
Basically just had your first introductory meeting last Wednesday.
Yep.
Basically Adam just kind of went over all of the buildings and properties that were, that would be discussed. And basically more of an introductory meeting, basically as to, what we should be looking for in the future and different, things that we would be doing.
That's good. How often are you gonna meet?
We're trying to do monthly, but
Okay.
we'll see how that goes.
Ish. And the landfill solar advisory.
Same thing, we had our introductory meeting. We decided that we would look at consultants who can recommend, give us the recommendations that we will need to take to an engineering company.
So our first step is determine the feasibility study. What can we actually do before we get too far in advertising for developers to come in and potentially build on it. We're gonna spend some time and money on feasibility.
Okay, town administrator, FY 2017 budget.
So I don't really have anything new on the budget. The big thing that would obviously has happened since the last time I made a budget presentation was the regional school district, Spencer East Brookfield, and their budget presentation, and they essentially incorporated the minimum local increase that we've been talking about. So I had already budgeted that amount, so there's not really any changes, no further reductions, pretty much status quo to the last budget presentation I have. But for you have a copy I emailed, and then you have a hard copy as well. So there's no really change there. What I want to focus on is the list of articles, because you're going to be looking through the budget and making recommendations on warrant articles in 2 weeks, on the 12th. So you have a list of articles. I'm currently drafting the warrant, working with town council on language and others. Everything is pretty much standard of the 27 articles that you've seen before. The first article is balancing this year's budget. We have revolving fund authorizations, we're fixing salaries, regional school budgets, out-of-district budgets, our general government budget, which you've had a lot of detail on, water, sewer, etc. And then at the very end, we have general bylaws and zoning bylaws. But what I want to focus on is Articles 18, 19, and 20. And those are the ones that are new to you folks, and we'll be having some discussion at town meeting on, and the selectmen are aware of these. The first is 18, and that is tied to the Main Street project. If you've seen the Main Street designs, you know there's a proposed relocation of Pleasant Street. So there's some permanent easements that we're looking at for that municipal parking lot area. So we will have some authorization from the voters to take portions of that parking lot and utilize that towards the Main Street project. So that's something that's not typical for you or the voters that come to town meeting. But most importantly, 19 and 20 is related to the roads project. So, as I mentioned before, last night, the selectmen had two choices in terms of the format of the question for the levy increase. As we all know, the funding for the project well exceeds our ability to pay within our operating budget, within our operating revenues, so it would require an increase of the levy, and that can be done one of two ways. One is an override and one is a debt exclusion. So that was one of the key pieces that the selectmen had to vote on last night, in addition to the dollar amount. The dollar amount was a little simpler vote in terms of the board chose to go with the middle option. We produced several scenarios, one of a $34 million backlog, one that would address the $19 million backlog, and then one $10 million. The selectmen voted for the middle number, taking into account the feedback they received from voters or taxpayers in addition to staff. $10 million just isn't going to be enough to do anything. 34 is a big number for people. It's probably the number that's needed, or definitely the number that's needed, but selectmen voted at 19. So back to the format of the question. One was in the format of a stabilization override. An override is permanent, obviously. The plan would be for the first 30 years of that permanent increase would have been to pay off the debt for the $19 million project. And then year 31 moving forward, you have the option of either taking on more debt or having that line item within the budget to fund road construction projects. The Board of Selectmen chose, instead of doing that option, chose the debt exclusion option. Some of the feedback that we had at the hearings were people like, finite ends to funding projects. So the selectmen kind of took heed to that and agreed after some deliberation to have the question set as a debt exclusion. So what you have here in Article 19 is an authorization to borrow. So the debt exclusion question only allows you to increase the levy. It doesn't allow you to borrow, doesn't allow you to fund anything. It just allows you that if funding is associated with this project and they're connected to each other, you have the right to increase the levy for that debt service amount on an annual basis until the project expires. So number 19 the voters are going to be asked to authorize the Board of Selectmen, the treasurer, to borrow up to $19 million to fund that project, contingent upon the debt exclusion passing at the election the week after. That's number 19. Number 20, state law dictates how the length of terms that you can borrow for certain things. For example, you can't borrow for a police car and have a 30-year note on a police car. You can only have, say, 5, or a ladder truck is probably more realistic, but you can't have, longer than the lifespan of the activity of the project. So one of the things that is limited in this project is pavement is kind of called out as having a minimum of a 10-year or 15-year limit in terms of borrowing. So we need special legislation to allow, when we do this complete road project, and we're going to do a 30-year project, it involves drainage, bridges, sidewalks, pavement, dirt, all the other things, is the pavement component, we need special legislation to have it be incorporated into the whole 30-year borrowing. So I've been working with a bond counsel and also counsel from the State House on that language. So those are the two things that are connected to the road project for town meeting, and those are kind of new, and we'll have some discussion, and then expect a presentation on the project that night by myself. But everything else in terms of your list of articles is pretty standard: water and sewer enterprise fund budgets, capital projects, capital budgets, et cetera, et cetera. So that, what I'm doing is I'm crafting and putting it in narrative form. I do have a draft that I sent out to town council today. Once I get that returned, hopefully by the end of the week, I'll try and get out to you early next week so you have a week to look at it in advance of the 12th. In addition, and I don't expect much to change at all in the budget. As I said, what you have there in your hands won't change much going to the 12th.
Okay, anybody have questions,
You
comments?
know, they changed it from the debt, the override to the debt exclusion. The money is still going to have to be used for roads only, correct?
Correct, because the language of the borrowing and the language of the debt exclusion question both refer to the debt for a specific project in the list, the comprehensive road project.
When you call it the debt exclusion, that's kind of a designated fund at that point in time anyway.
Right, so if you did a debt exclusion for a fire truck,
Right,
so
it'd
when
be
we
a fire
increase
truck.
$150,000 per year to pay the debt,
Right,
the expense and the revenue are tied together. So we can't take $150,000 and use it to buy a dump truck. We have to buy it on. So same thing here, the money for the debt exclusion, the $19 million, the debt payment has to be used to pay off the note on the roads project.
That's fine.
And once the debt is paid off, that goes away. Now, the other side of that coin is the original proposal that came out of the committee and that Adam put forward was that it would be a stabilization fund override, which would have provided in perpetuity for road maintenance. There is no, and between the $19 million that was approved and the $34 million that would be required to fund the total picture over 30 years, it is essentially money for certain specific projects, but not for maintenance and upkeep of those projects or any, general overall improvement. So it's not going to do the entire job that was essentially put forward, and it does not, it leaves out there in the future another group of people to come along after 30 years and deal with the conditions of the roads at that time. So
I have to interject. I mean, you'll see the meeting on television. We agree 100% that $34 million was the project to go for. We went through these public hearings. We have a history. We cannot go, this is a critical project, and you'll hear my crying on television. It is a critical project. If, we're hearing left and right, Spencer's on a downward spiral. Why can't Spencer get better? Well, we're doing things to do that. You're on a solar project, you're on building reuse, we're on economic development. But the common issue along all of them was that our infrastructure stinks. It's crumbling. We can't revitalize neighborhoods with the roads as they are all around. Something has to be done. So we went to these hearings. We had to balance what we were hearing, the ability to pay from the voters. We also didn't want to cripple and paralyze any other municipal services that may need funding in the future. And we were reminded that at the last hearing. And that is fair. I mean, that is fair. And we have a history of what folks in this town, the current demographic is comfortable with, and they're comfortable with the debt exclusion method for financing projects. So we just had, on top of all that, we had to weigh the risk of either getting that or getting some number to do that. And we thought 10 was just totally inadequate. We understand there'll be gaps there, but we'll have to stretch those dollars as far as we can. We hope that with the work we've done, Paul, and things like the FMPC and the tools that we've created to do that'll go in, that'll get institutionalized so that there'll be continuity here, and that project will go back on a 15-year, 20-year, 30-year window, so that the community will be reminded at the appropriate time that this thing is coming up within 5 years, that we gotta somehow have a mechanism to fund maintenance. But we were just worried about going through what we went through the last time, and that was getting nothing from the ballot box.
So could those projects, that 19 million be, does it have to take 30 years to spend it? Or you're just saying that the projects will get done sooner, it's the borrowing that will be paid off over 30 years?
So the impact that we put forth to the voters was based on $19 million over 30 years. So if you take that 19 million and spread it over 20 years, you're not gonna be able to do as many projects, right? Because or I shouldn't say that.
Well,
You could do the same amount of projects, the
Right.
problem is the cost of the debt payment would severely rise and be not in line with what we share to the voters.
Okay,
Because it's like taking your house, and if you have a 15-year mortgage versus a 30-year mortgage, you know, your principal and interest is that much higher because you're paying it off quicker. So we're not gonna do that, and that's why we're trying for the 30 years.
What I was really thinking more about was, if, for whatever reason, you know, you get to leverage it, and I know you'll leverage as much as you can with any state grants and things like that. If there should happen to, who knows, be some incredible, windfall that reduce the cost of some of those,
Yeah.
some of the projects or something like that, and everything you targeted got done sooner because of, you know, because somebody left the town a lot of money or something like that. State grant money and things like that.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I think you'd pay it off early at any point if we had a windfall. Or, as I've asked you before, we get a semi windfall, we can refinance the term of the debt, which is usually doesn't happen in
There'll be
municipalities.
multiple options, and I think the board would have to have public hearings, because the other thing is you have $15 million in projects that you didn't touch. So let's say you got $1 million grant to do a bridge, and
You have the capability of adding on, so that 19
the
million.
$19 million is the
big-
number in terms of funding, and we came up with, say, 17 roads
Right.
that need to be done. So, or there's 7 bridges in there. So if the state comes in and gives you $1 million for one of those bridges, you still have authorization to do 19 million. So does that mean you take that million and then do another road segment? Or do you say, okay, we're gonna reduce the borrowing to 18 million, or what? I mean, it still has to be connected to roads, but the board would have some options at that point, and they should probably take my recommendation when you get public feedback in terms of what to do that, because you've already had the vote. So paying it off really, I mean, early is one way to obviously shorten the end of the project, but that may not be the best interest to
Right.
do, so.
Right, it may, but I was thinking of from two different places. One is the flexibility, depending on other funds that come in. You're not locked into, using it for, it all has to be for roads, but it's not locked into the currently top of the hit parade right now.
What I'm saying, so if $1 million comes in for bridge number 6.
Yep.
And gets funded, we're flexible enough that we don't have to spend our money on bridge number 6, and we have to turn that grant down, or whatever reason. We have, the authorization of the borrowing is not for, I mean, obviously, we know what our priorities are and what we've presented, so we're gonna try and stay in line with that, but there's different variables that, based on, let's say, for $19 million and the bids come in higher, we can't do bridge number 6 because we just didn't have enough money in the 19 million, and that falls off the list altogether. So, like I said last night, it's not a perfect science. You're subject to interest rates, you're subject to cost increases in terms of asphalt and steel and what the bids come in and prevailing wage rates and all those types of things. So there's a lot of variables that could go your favor or not in terms of, we could do 20 roads for $19 million, or we could do $17 million, 17 roads for that much money. So we have no idea. I mean, it's
No, but within,
trying to do
but you're
the-
not,
we're not tied. We're flexible enough that we have some
Right.
ability.
and you could spend it on maintenance and upkeep, not only brand new, heavy duty stuff.
The plan is to spend on heavy duty
Well,
stuff.
I know that's what the plan is. I'm
It's a
just saying,
project. I mean, that's
but
what
the
we're presenting to the voters.
flexibility-
It's a project. It's so many roads, so many bridges. It's a project. It's not maintenance, because the maintenance stuff is what should be built into the operating budget, or that you're doing it using your chapter 90, because it's an annual fund resource. A project is, $19 million. $1 million is for Bridge 6, $3 million is for Charlton Road, $4 million for Paxton Road. So we're not gonna say, okay, yeah, we're not gonna do bridge number 6, we're gonna take that $1 million and do crack sealing town-wide. That's not how we're gonna do it. We didn't present it that way, it's not gonna be that way, it's gonna be a project.
And I didn't mean that either, I just meant like parallel, so you do this project, and as you've done, I mean, 31's the big one that everybody's talking about, so you do 31, put a bunch of money into that big fat project 31, and before the 30 years is up, some things have to be dealt with because it's been driven on for another 20 years. So you might have to do crack sealing as you
We'll
know.
do crack sealing, but it can't come out of the money that we borrowed.
All right, that's what I'm,
Because you've already
that's what
spent
I'm
it,
asking.
we're gonna spend the 19 million in the first 3 or 4
Okay.
years. So in year 25, if the bridge falls apart again, or Route 31 falls apart again, we don't have that of that $19 million left to come back and fix that road, because it's
So,
all been
Then
spent
part of the
in the first
object
couple of years.
is then to plan by year 5, 8, 10 to maintain all the new work that's gotten done.
Right, so you're gonna have a
To
year or
build
two
it
of
into
do
the
nothing,
regular
and then
operating
you're gonna have
budget.
years of it's beginning to deteriorate, and that's where you're gonna spend your chapter 90 trying to crack seal those roads, yeah. So there will be
Can I
some maintenance of
interrupt
that,
for
but it won't
just
come
a
out of that 19 million.
Is there a time limit for?
Nope.
No, okay, because something over here just buzzed.
Oh, really? I'll take a look at it, no, we don't.
Well, that's time to go.
No, we have
Camera says.
magic cards now, we don't have those old videotapes.
So we have a phone alarm.
Go ahead, so if anyone else has any, does anyone else have any questions, or?
At the last hearing, we got overwhelmingly negative feedback on the override, because, you know, theoretically, at the end of that 30 years, you're still gonna have that 1.3 million, or whatever it is, on the rolls. And, you know, you could very well expect that would go towards maintenance, or keeping up the roads, but there was a general mistrust on that. So we have to overcome that in the future with other initiatives, but,
Well, the other thing you've got too is that if it was an override, and I mentioned it to Adam, a lot of the people in town look at it as you're actually adding 2.5% to that override each year as well, so that amount keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You know, and some people don't like that.
Yep.
right. And on top of that, the probability that that funding level in 30 years is still not appropriate for it anyway, you'll come back and ask again for that on top of what is being,
I won't.
yeah.
I'll be in my 90s at that point, I won't.
Yeah.
We'll be gumming it.
You know, if you stop and think about it, based on what's happened over the last 30 years, we may very well find out that in the next 30 years, we won't be driving on roads anymore, we'll be just riding above them.
Yep.
So the condition of the road may be immaterial, you never know.
Or they'll come up with a devise a material that is just
Yeah.
indestructible. So we always hope, we can always hope.
I mean, everybody talks about these driverless cars being a futuristic thing, and it's not that far away now, all of a sudden, so, you never know.
Well, I see a lot of driverless cars now.
Yeah, well,
Though not the optimum number, I think this is a big,
well, I hope
big
it,
step for this.
I hope it passes at the ballot box, because you'll get the approval of
The town meeting.
at the town meeting.
Yeah, we're gonna go on a full court press, I think, after this, and have cable shows and utilize the media that's not been present enough.
Are all the meetings that you had, the 3 meetings on the roads, are they on YouTube?
All but one.
All but one. The first one, we thought we'd have 15 people, and it was election night, and we had 110 people show up in this room. So we rolled up our sleeves and moved voting
We were set up to broadcast in
boxes.
this room, but the cabinet in the other room was locked, nobody had a key, nobody here had a key to get into it. so-
That was actually the second one. The first one, we had one person show up and they left after they realized they were at the wrong meeting. So then we did a reverse 911 call, and then we had 110 people show up at the second. We did a reverse 911 at the third, and we probably had 75 people in the Great Hall. And then we continued the public hearing until last night, and then there was maybe a handful of people that came back. So there was 4 opportunities to have discussion, in addition to just reaching out individually or emails or calling, so, you know, there's info out there.
I was actually surprised at the number of people at those meetings that were actually in favor of doing something.
Yep.
I really thought that the majority that showed up were gonna be dead set against it, and I was surprised at some of the people that said, well, if we're gonna do it, we really ought to do the 34 million, and it's like,
Where'd that
Really?
come from,
Yeah.
huh?
where'd that come
Newton
from?
Town.
Yeah, that we did.
Newtown, right?
And
Yeah.
we also knew, I think we knew in advance what some of the arguments would be, so we were prepared for those.
Mhm.
And, you know, I think we actually turned some opinions on that second meeting that we had over here.
I think everybody that showed up agreed the roads are not in good condition and they need to be redone. I think that was the common theme. Everybody knew it came in there, and that project can almost sell itself. The roads are just in really bad
Right,
condition.
yeah,
in this
how can you
community.
not notice?
So I think that everybody gets, there's gonna be a certain group, minority that say you have plenty of money to do everything you need to do, and we know we don't. And I think the people that understand our situation and the money that comes from the state, and we're, like I said, we're at the 2002 level of state aid, so, you know, inflation has gone up since then, obviously, and we haven't been able to keep up with our roads, and that's one of the main reasons, so, there's gonna be a small group of people there that are just gonna vote no matter what we
Yeah, right.
do. Like Paul said, there was definitely a group that was under, you need to do it, and you need to do it right. And then there was another group that we want you to do something, but you gotta be.
You can't ask for money.
You can ask for money, but you gotta take into account our resources, so to speak. So that's what the board is trying to balance.
When you go to do the shows or whatever prior to it, you need to stress two things that the large majority of this town still don't understand, and that is, one, that Route 31 is not a state road that's already been approved for payment, so we just need to wait a little longer for the state to come in and do it. The fact that it's not a state road, that's the first thing. And the other one is the fact that Chapter 90 money, just as Adam said at each meeting, what it actually equates out to, there's people in this town that believe that the state is giving us money to take care of our roads, and we're just simply using it elsewhere.
Right.
So, those people that
Absolutely.
bother to come to those meetings need to hear that, because
Yep.
otherwise they're just gonna go under that assumption again, that if they read the articles in the newspaper, oh, they got plenty of money, they're just blowing it on other stuff.
Absolutely, you're
Yeah.
correct, Paul. So I think we'll tape a show at, we'll do another public hearing, I think, and then we'll tape a show at the cable station, have that run out of loop. So,
Right. Well, the last nights will be on Saturday. And there's one, the first one I think is, I don't think it's still on. I think you've had another meeting since then, so.
Yep.
But it's there, and that's it. Any other questions, comments, et cetera? So I just wanted to say, I emailed you all because it's been bothering me, sorry, Adam, but it's been bothering me that every time you send out that memo, the budget memo, you mention that there are fewer students in the school this year and that the money's going up. And yes, there are fewer students in the school, so I wanted to find out why. I mean, I kind of knew some of it, but I wanted to go in and look at what the state, why our minimum local contribution was going up, even though the number of students was going down. So first of all, the numbers based on the year before, it's based on the October 1st, so like for this FY17 budget, it's based on enrollment October 1st, 2015, last October. So it's always running a year behind, so there's always gonna be a discrepancy. But then I found out how arcane the system is that they use to come up with the basic number of students, and I'm not even, you can go on the DESI website and you can find the formula. And that's all I'm gonna say, because it doesn't appear to me to be an actual count of bodies. There are mathematical factors that go into it. But I did find this sort of these interesting things that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education FY17 Chapter 70 summaries, and it shows the FY13 through FY17 foundation budget, required district contribution, and Chapter 70 aid, and it puts it all in numbers, but I emailed you all this today. But you can see by the graph The foundation budget in Spencer has gone down a little bit, marginally. The required local contribution by the state has gone up, and chapter 70 has stayed flat. And when you look at the actual numbers, it has stayed pretty flat. FY16 was 13,457,639. This year, FY17 proposed 13,492,19. It went up 0.26% or $34,000. So again, this has nothing to do with how the districts that we give money to spend the money. This is before they get anywhere near it. And it's the same thing here. This is Bay Paths as well. And they're Vogue, so it's a little bit different, but you can see, by the graphs, actually their foundation budget's increasing, their required local is increasing, and their chapter 70 is increasing. I went and looked at some of the other towns. I have Quabbin and I have Dudley Charlton that I printed out, and pretty much the chapter 78 for regional schools is staying the same. And the minimum local required is kind of going up. So these are factors that we just have to, that's why I was hoping that with that Foundation Budget Commission, as you were, that they would deal with the formulas and things, but they don't. So,
I got a question on that, because we as a board Donnie's last year, we started communicating to other communities
Yeah.
to attack the specific calculation. And from that, they said, no, don't bother, there's gonna be this committee in Beacon Hill, which you became a part of, correct?
Well, so when you say formulas, there's different formulas. So the Education Reform Act 1993 sets the foundation budget formula, which says that there's gonna be a minimum expenditure by every district based on this formula of how much they spend on education, health insurance, fringe benefits, et cetera, et cetera. That formula is not the formula that we were talking about, that we were talking about those other towns about. That is the minimum local contribution and the target share. So that's the contribution that the state puts in and the contribution that the towns put in. So that's a formula that is then applied to the foundation budget, correct?
Right.
So the Foundation Budget Study Commission, as part of their charge, they didn't look at the split between the towns and the state. And that's what, and as John said earlier, that was the part that we were worried about. If they changed the formula that was created in '93 for the foundation budget, and they increased that and say the minimum foundation budget needs to be here because we haven't factored in all these other things, that's fine and dandy. But if you're not addressing the minimum local contribution and the split between the towns and the state, such as, that's fine if you want to increase that formula, but if the state wants to pay all of it, that's great. If you want us to pay a portion of that, then that means our minimum local contribution's going up, our target share is going up, and we're already getting killed by our target share and our minimum locals. So we did have a regional group talking, and that regional group still talks to the Department of Education, but, it's just like the foundation budget is not going anywhere, this discussion is not going anywhere. So I don't really have any great answers, but, you look at the chapter 70, increase to the towns, it's $20 per student. I mean, that's 30,000 because we have 1,500 students in Spencer East Brookfield. I mean, what can you do with $30,000 in a $30 million budget? It's ridiculously low. So, I don't have any great answers for you on that one.
No, but I think it's important to know that it's action that has to be taken outside the town. I mean, it has to be taken.
It's at the state level,
at the
but
state
again,
level,
It's all politics too, so
Oh,
pressures comes from the communities, overwhelming pressure, which is why I hope it would be a start with those conversations 2 years ago.
But and then there are towns that have all kinds of money, and are willing to spend more. And they still, as John said, they still get their 15 or 17%. I mean, and they have parents who, even though the foundation budget is, even though their actual school spending is high, parents want things, and parents come and say, put an override on, we'll vote for it, because our kid, we want our kids to have this, and we will pay for it, and there are towns that do that. Look at some of the W's down around Boston, you know, it's the total other side of the coin. And so do we penalize towns that are willing to pay a great deal of money for education to, you know, and not share some of it? I mean, they're all paying taxes that go into it, just, you know, philosophically. I mean, that was the thought behind the, when they started in 2006, raising the individuals' contributions of the towns to the regional school districts, because I say it all the time, town state used to pay over 80%, and they said, nope, we're not gonna, you know, you guys have to help yourselves, so there you go. And as we all know, just because money goes away, it doesn't mean the need for services go away in any of our districts or departments. All right, anybody have anything else? Then I will say our next meeting will be April 12th, 2016. It will be the public hearing on the FY 2017 budget in the court hall, not in here. And then after that, we will vote recommendations on the annual town meeting warrant, because the next day, we have to have the recommendations to put in the warrant book. Annual town meeting is Thursday, May 5th, 2016. Annual town elections are May 10th, 2016, Monday, May 10th. So, if there's nothing else, anyone care to make a
I'll
motion?
make a motion to adjourn.
And second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, it is 8:45, and I have to go and shut the camera off.